Catch it! Catch the butterfly, intellectual! Not like that, you'll crush its wings." Laughter, thick and viscous as mazout oil, filled the far corner of the barracks, where a dim Ilyich light bulb snatched 2 cots and a bedside table from the gloom. Junior Sergeant Yuri Melnik, squad leader nicknamed Komod, dresser, having entered the barracks after reporting to the duty officer, stopped at the entrance. He immediately understood what was happening. Again, squatting in front of a first-period Old-timer, a huge, clumsy fellow named Grigory Romanov, nicknamed Ural, the Urals, was Private Andrei Zaitsev. Thin, with delicate, almost girlish wrists, he was flailing his hands ridiculously in the air. There was no strength or anger in his movements, only hunted desperation. Back in civilian life, guys like him wore thick-lensed glasses, read remark, and smelled not of foot wraps but of library dust. Here they called him artist. "I don't see the butterfly, Comrade Private," Ural drawled lazily, sprawled on his cot with his leg crossed. His boots, polished to a mirror shine, by someone else, of course, gleamed defiantly. "You're not trying hard enough, you disembodied spirit. Come on, take flight. Show me how it flutters." The artist froze, lowering his hands. His face, pale in the lamplight, was wet with sweat or tears. "Comrade Private, I can't." "What can't you do?" Ural slowly sat up, and steel rang in his voice. "Can't you follow an order from a senior conscript? How are you going to defend the motherland if you can't even catch a butterfly?" Yuri Melnik, Komod, sighed deeply. He was 20. He'd served a year and a half, earned his junior sergeant stripes not for pretty eyes, but for keeping his mouth shut and following orders. Any orders. Now he had to give orders himself and maintain order. But order in the army was a loose concept. There was the regulations-mandated order for officers and inspections. And there was the barracks order, bestial, where the deads ruled. And he, Komod, was stuck right in the middle, between the political officer's hammer and Ural's anvil. He took a few steps forward. The creak of his boots made everyone turn around. "Cut it out!" Melnik's voice sounded firmer than he expected. He was trying to copy the intonations of their company commander, Captain Zhukov. Sharp, chopping. Ural lazily turned his broad head. No surprise or fear was reflected on his face, only a slight, condescending curiosity. "Oh, the dressers arrived. What is it, Sergeant? Are we disturbing the peace?" "Private Romanov," I said. "Cut it out," Yuri repeated, looking directly into the dead's brazen eyes. "Private Zaitsev is scheduled for kitchen duty in an hour. He needs to rest." It was a weak, almost pathetic attempt to find a legitimate reason. Everyone knew that nobody rested before duty, but it was the only language he could speak in the presence of subordinates without losing the remains of his authority. "Rest?" Ural snorted and leaned back on his pillow again. "That's exactly what he's doing. Physical exercise, good for a young body. Right, artist?" Andrei Zaitsev was silent, staring at the floor. His shoulders were shaking. "Romanov, I don't repeat myself." Melnik's voice rang with metal. He took another step, closing the distance. "Stand up." This was dangerous. He was issuing a direct challenge. Either Ural would obey now, saving face, respecting the sergeant, or he would tell him to get lost, and then Komod's authority would collapse completely, turning to dust. The seconds stretched like tar. Next to Ural sat another did, Maxim Kozlov, nicknamed Pitersky, from St. Petersburg. He was silently picking at something under his fingernail, pretending that what was happening didn't concern him. But his tense posture said otherwise. Finally, Ural slowly, languidly rose. He was half a head taller than Melnik and much broader in the shoulders. "Yes, stand up, Comrade Junior Sergeant," he hissed, looking down at Yuri. Evil lights danced in his eyes. "Permission to comply?" Comply, Melnik snapped. Zaitsev, with me. He turned and walked towards his storage room, a tiny closet where uniforms and gas masks were stored, and which served as his unofficial office. He heard the artist hurriedly get up behind him and scurry after him. He didn't look back, but he felt Ural's burning gaze on his back. Today, he had won. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. Tonight his spirits, new recruits, would pay for it. Airplanes made of blankets would fly. Someone would be drying crocodiles or doing push-ups until they collapsed until morning. And it would be his fault, the righteous commode. The storage room smelled of cloth, boot polish, and dust. Melnik sat on a stool and pointed Zaitsev to an ammunition box. Sit down. The artist sat on the very edge, hunched over, as if expecting a blow. Thank you, Comrade Junior Sergeant. For what? Yuri grumbled, taking a pack of Prima cigarettes from his tunic pocket. He struck a match, inhaled the bitter smoke. For making things even worse for you? Why worse? Zaitsev didn't understand. Melnik smirked wryly. Because now they'll take it out on you with triple the force, for snitching to the commander, even though you didn't say anything. I didn't. I know. Yuri interrupted him. That's just how it works. You were supposed to endure it. Or, I don't know, maybe try to joke it off somehow. How can you joke about this? Andrei asked quietly, and his voice was so hopeless that Melnik felt a knot of dread in his stomach. They're like animals. Yuri was silent. What could he tell him? That in 6 months he'd be a Cherpak, second-year soldier, himself, able to boss around the Duhi, new recruits? That in another year he'd be a dead old-timer, and these same Urals would look at him with fawning respect? This kid, the artist, wouldn't last 6 months. He'd break before then. Guys like him always broke first. You're from Leningrad, right? Melnik asked to change the subject. Yes, Zaitsev nodded. I studied at the Mukha. Where? The Vera Mukina Higher School of Art and Design. I used to draw. He used to draw. Yuri thought with longing. Here in the construction battalion, in the middle of the Kazakh steppe, where the only entertainment was building yet another useless project and marching on the parade ground, his ability to draw was valued less than the ability to quickly and efficiently wrap foot wraps. Listen, Zaitsev. Melnik stubbed out his cigarette on the edge of a tin can serving as an ashtray. Get this. The army isn't some academy. There are different rules here. You have to be simple. If they tell you to dig, you dig. If they tell you to catch a butterfly, you catch it. The main thing is not to show that you hate it. Pretend you're having fun. They see your tears, your fear, and they like it. They feed on it, understand? Andrei nodded silently, but Yuri could tell he didn't understand anything, or didn't want to understand. In his world, you couldn't pretend that catching a non-existent butterfly was fun. Go on, get ready for duty, Melnik sighed. And remember, don't rock the boat, and don't come running to me. I can't be with you 24 hours a day. Learn to survive on your own. The artist stood up. Yes, learn to survive on my own. He repeated mechanically and left. Yuri was left alone. He lit another cigarette. Pressure from both sides was squeezing him like a vice. On one side, the officers. The political officer, Major Sergenko, droned on every week during political instruction about the high morale of the Soviet soldier, about the sense of collectivism and military camaraderie. He demanded individual work with personnel from the squad leaders. If the major had seen the butterfly scene, he would have put on a show trial. But not for Ural. For him, Melnik. For allowing non-regulation relationships. Because it was not customary to touch the dedi. They were the officers' tacit support, free labor that kept the young recruits in line. On the other side, those same dedi, Ural and his company. They had already served 2.5 years. They had 6 months until demobilization, and they considered themselves the masters of the barracks. Any attempt to put them in their place was perceived as a personal insult. They could ambush an unwanted sergeant in the dark, set him up in front of the officers, turn his squad service into hell. And Melnik, who was only a Cherpak himself, a second-year soldier, understood this perfectly well. He was walking on a razor's edge. The duty room door creaked. Oleg Petrov, a quick, reddish-haired guy from his squad, stood on the threshold. Nickname, Speedy. "Comrade Junior Sergeant, permission to enter?" "Come in, Petrov. What did you want?" "Just wanted to." Oleg came inside and closed the door behind him. "I saw your conversation with Ural. Bold." "Stupid," Melnik corrected. "Well, that depends on how you look at it." Petrov grinned. "The guys appreciated it, but the artist is screwed now." "I know." "He won't make it," Oleg said seriously. "He's completely different. He cried into his pillow last night, quietly so no one would hear. But I wasn't asleep, I heard. They'll finish him off." "What are you suggesting?" Yuri asked wearily. "Guard him with a rifle, lock him in the duty room, transfer him somewhere, to the medical unit, as a clerk to headquarters. You're a squad leader. You have connections to the warrant officers, to Goncharenko, the storekeeper, for example." Warrant officer Stanislav Goncharenko was the local kingpin. Everything passed through his hands, from new uniforms to scarce canned meat. It was possible to come to an agreement with him, but the price was high. "Goncharenko won't even lift a finger for nothing," Melnik objected. "And what can the artist offer him? Draw a picture? He needs a case of vodka, at least." "Then I don't know." Petrov shrugged. "But there's going to be trouble, Yur. Mark my words. Ural won't leave him alone. You humiliated him in front of everyone today. Now he'll take out all his anger on Zaitsev." Oleg left, leaving Melnik with his thoughts. Trouble. He felt it himself. It hung in the stuffy air of the barracks, in the smell of chlorine and sweat, in the silence of the hunted duhi and the insolent grins of the dedi. In the evening after dinner, during which the artist, standing duty at the serving window, received his share of humiliation, Ural threw a bowl of pearl barley porridge in his face, saying it was cold. Melnik sat on the parade ground and smoked. He had seen the artist's duty. He had seen how, without saying a word, he wiped his face and began silently collecting the sticky porridge from the floor. He had seen Ural's triumphant look, and he did nothing, because there were officers in the dining hall. To intervene meant airing dirty laundry in public. The consequences would have been unpredictable. He felt like the lowest coward. All his affected sergeant's sternness, all those dismissed and disperse, were just a mask hiding an 18-year-old kid who was afraid of that hulking brute, Ural. And even more, he was afraid of the responsibility for this unfortunate artist. He hadn't asked to be made a commander. He just wanted to serve out his time quietly, like everyone else. But Captain Zhukov had seen a commanding streak in him. Damn that streak to hell. The artist himself appeared from around the corner of the barracks. He was walking slowly, his head down. Seeing Melnik, he stopped indecisively. "Come here," Yuri called out. Andrei approached and sat down next to him on the concrete curb. "How's KP duty?" Melnik asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Okay," Zaitsev replied quietly. This army habit of answering okay to any question, even if someone had just dunked your head in the toilet, drove Yuri crazy. "I saw what happened in the mess hall," he said bluntly. The artist flinched. "It's nothing, Comrade Junior Sergeant. I'll get used to it." "Don't lie to yourself at least," Melnick said angrily. "You won't get used to it. They'll break you." He picked up a pebble from the ground and hurled it with force into the darkness. "Why are they like this?" Andrei suddenly asked. His voice was full of sincere, childlike bewilderment. "We're all Soviet people. We were taught to help each other. In books, in movies." Melnick laughed bitterly. "The books are over, artist. The movies too. Now it's the army. Here, every man is a wolf to another, or a grandfather, or a greenhorn. Choose who you'll be. There's no other option." They sat in silence for a long time. It grew dark. Snatch of commands drifted from the checkpoint. Somewhere far away in the steppe, a dog howled. "I wrote a letter home." Zaitsev broke the silence. "To my mom. I wrote that everything was fine, that I'm serving like everyone else, that the food's great." "You did the right thing," Yuri nodded. "There's no need to worry them." "I wanted to draw our barracks for her. And the steppe. It's beautiful here at sunset." He looked at Melnick. In his eyes, for a moment, gleamed a flicker of his former civilian spark. "But I didn't. I'm afraid she'll realize that I'm unhappy here." "She'll figure it out anyway," Melnick thought, but aloud he said something else. "We'll get through this, Zaitsev. Everyone gets through it, and you'll get through it too. It'll be easier in 6 months. He said this to encourage the guy. But deep down, he knew he was lying. For people like the artist, it never got easier. For them, there was only one endless today, filled with fear and humiliation. When the command "lights out" rang out, and the barracks fell silent, plunging into a heavy, fitful sleep, Yuri lay awake for a long time. He listened. He listened to the breathing of dozens of men, the creaking of bunks, someone's cough. He waited. He waited for muffled slaps, moans, or quiet weeping to come from the corner where the greenhorns slept. But it was quiet, suspiciously quiet. Ural had apparently decided to postpone his revenge, or he had come up with something worse. Yuri closed his eyes. The artist's face stood before him, pale, with huge, despairing eyes, and the question, why are they like this? He didn't have an answer. The army didn't give answers. It posed questions point blank, and the price for the wrong answer was too high. That night, he understood that the story with the artist was just beginning, and that he, Junior Sergeant Melnick, Komod, had already become its main, albeit unwilling, participant. He didn't yet know that this story wouldn't end with a discharge or a transfer to another unit. He didn't know that a flight into nowhere, a court-martial, and a shot that would divide his life into before and after lay ahead. He just lay there listening to the silence, which was scarier than any scream. "You're not sewing those collar tabs right, artist. The needle's dancing in your hand like a drunken girl at a party. Are you serving the motherland or embroidering handkerchiefs for your sweetheart?" Maxim Kozlov's voice, nicknamed Ural for his size and stubbornness, was low and viscous like fuel oil. It enveloped, pressed down, leaving no air to breathe. Stanislav Goncharenko, the very same artist, flinched. His slender fingers, accustomed to pencils and brushes, slipped again, and the needle painfully pierced his fingertip. He yelped quietly, stuck his finger in his mouth, feeling the salty taste of blood. They were sitting in the storage room, reeking of shoe polish, foot wraps, and cheap tobacco. Ural, sprawled on a stool like the master of life, lazily watched Goncharenko's torment, On the grandfather's lap lay an almost finished demobilization album in which the artist had been painstakingly drawing vignettes in calligraphic script and painting missiles piercing a shield with the inscription, NATO, in India ink for the third night in a row. "What are you whimpering about, Boot?" Ural stretched lazily. "Are you afraid of blood? And how are you going to go into battle if the enemy attacks? Are you going to say to him, 'Comrade imperialist, don't shoot, I'm afraid of blood'? Is that it?" Goncharenko remained silent, his head bowed low. The light from the dim bulb fell on his fair, almost white hair, making him look like a dandelion about to be blown away by a draft. "I'm asking you, soldier," Ural barked, and Goncharenko flinched again. "No, comrade senior sergeant," he whispered. "What comrade am I to you?" Kozlov smirked. "I'm your god and king for the next year. You won't stop bringing me butter until you start eating it yourself." "Got it, you impressionist painter? This isn't the Tretyakov Gallery. This is the construction battalion. You need to be mixing concrete, not smearing snot on your palette. Now, so. Make sure that collar is as taut as a string by lights out. White, without blood. Otherwise you'll be sleeping standing up, like a horse. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Goncharenko replied, inaudibly. At that moment, the door of the storeroom creaked open, and Andrei Zaitsev appeared on the threshold. He had just returned from a meeting with the company commander, where he, the squad leader, had once again been chewed out for poor performance in drill. Seeing the scene, Ural relaxed and Goncharenko huddled into a ball. Zaitsev felt a dull rage simmering inside. He already knew what was coming next. He knew this scenario by heart. "Kozlov, what's going on here?" Zaitsev's voice sounded deliberately firm, the way he had rehearsed in front of the mirror. A commander's voice. Ural didn't even turn around. "This is a scheduled training session to instill skills in young soldiers, Comrade Junior Sergeant," he drawled lazily, putting mocking emphasis on Zaitsev's rank. "Private Goncharenko is mastering the art of sewing for the needs of the unit. I'm in charge of this unit," Zaitsev enunciated, stepping inside. The smell became thicker, hitting his nostrils. "And I didn't give any such orders. Goncharenko, to the barracks. Prepare for lights out." Goncharenko shot him a frightened but hopeful look. He had already started to get up when Ural's heavy hand landed on his shoulder, pressing him back onto the stool. "And I say he'll sew," Kozlov said calmly, but with a clear threat in his voice, finally turning his broad, impenetrable face to Zaitsev. "His hands are growing out of the wrong place, Commode. He needs to be taught. You'll be the one blushing in front of the company commander at the formation later. I'm helping you, so to speak, educating the personnel." Commode. Squad leader. The nickname had stuck to Zaitsev from the very first day, as soon as the warrant officer had read out the order of his appointment. And that word contained everything, both respect for the position and mockery of his attempts to be a real commander. He was furniture, a function, an object that stood between the grandfathers and the newbies. "Keep your methods of education to yourself, Ural," Zaitsev hissed, clenching his fists in his breeches pockets. "There's a regulation, and I demand that it be followed. Private Goncharenko, carry out the order." A second of silence hung in the air, thick and ringing. Goncharenko froze, looking from Zaitsev to Ural. He was a mouse between two cats, and both seemed equally dangerous to him. Ural slowly removed his hand from his shoulder. He stood up, towering over Zaitsev by almost a head. "Regulations, you say?" He smirked crookedly. "Well, well, Commode, Mr. Regulations. Just be careful your regulations don't backfire on you. Here, besides the written ones, there are also unwritten ones, and they're more important." He turned to Goncharenko. "Go, but the album has to be ready by morning, and find me a piece of butter. Vologda brand. Got it? So I can spread it on bread tomorrow while you rookies are eating empty porridge. Otherwise I'll be developing your artistic talent on your own back. Through plywood. You're dismissed." Goncharenko bolted out of the storeroom. Zaitsev remained standing opposite Ural. He felt humiliated. His direct order had been ignored, his authority trampled in front of a subordinate. He was the commander, but the real power lay with this hulking, demobilization-bound soldier who had only 6 months left to serve. "You're going too far, Maxim," Andrei said, more quietly, almost humanely. "You'll break him. The guy's already on the edge." "That's called hardening, Zaitsev," Ural snapped, sitting down again and picking up the album. "The army turns sissies into men. If he doesn't break, he'll become a man. And if he breaks, then he never was one. Natural selection. Go command commode. Make sure the beds are made properly. You're better at that." Zaitsev left, slamming the door. In the barracks, they were already preparing for the evening roll call. Soldiers scurried back and forth, making beds, aligning blankets along a straight line. Zaitsev walked down the central aisle, mechanically making remarks. "Petrov, fluff up your pillow. Shevchenko, the stool is crooked." But his thoughts were far away. He saw Goncharenko's hunted look and Ural's insolent smirk. He was between a rock and a hard place. Complain to the officers, and Goncharenko would be branded a snitch, and his life would turn into hell. Don't intervene, and Ural and the educators like him would drive the guy to his grave. He found Goncharenko by his bunk. He was sitting, staring at a fixed point. His hands were trembling slightly. "Stas, are you okay?" Zaitsev asked quietly, sitting down next to him. Goncharenko didn't answer. He was just staring ahead with unseeing eyes. "Listen," Zaitsev lowered his voice to a whisper. "You hang in there. I'll talk to the deputy commander for political affairs. Maybe they'll transfer you to the Lenin room as a decorator. You'll be drawing wall newspapers, away from all this." Goncharenko slowly turned his head. Tears stood in his eyes, but they didn't flow. They were frozen, like resin. "It's useless, Comrade Junior Sergeant," he whispered. "He'll get to me there too. He doesn't need a wall newspaper. He needed me to humiliate myself, to get him oil paints, cigarettes, to do his duty for him, to paint his album. I can't take it anymore." "Everyone can, and you will too," Zaitsev said uncertainly, repeating a memorized phrase they drilled into them during political instruction. "A Soviet soldier can do anything." But what if he can't? A wild, hunted spark flickered in Goncharenko's eyes. What if he's not a soldier? What if he's an artist? "I can't get oil paints, Andrei. I don't know how to steal in the mess hall. They'll catch me, and it'll be even worse. He'll kill me." "He won't kill you," Zaitsev said firmly, though he didn't believe it himself. "I won't let him." After lights out, when the barracks was plunged into darkness, punctuated by the snoring and muttering of sleeping men, Zaitsev lay awake. Every sound, the creak of a bed, a cough, the footsteps of the duty officer, echoed loudly in his head. He replayed the conversation with Ural, the humiliation, his own powerlessness. Suddenly, he felt someone touching his shoulder. He sat up sharply. Beside him, crouching, was Oleg Petrov, the guy from Petersburg. A smart, reasonable guy who kept to himself and rarely got involved in conflicts, but saw and understood everything. "Komod, we need to talk," he whispered. "What's wrong?" Zaitsev asked in the same whisper. "You've seen what they're doing to the artist," Petrov said quickly, but quietly. "It won't stop. Ural will finish him off. And not just him. The other old-timers are watching and starting too. Today it's Ural. Tomorrow they'll make Goncharenko scrub the floors with a toothbrush for bestiary. The day after tomorrow, something else. He won't be able to handle it." "I know," Zaitsev said dully. "I'm going to the political officer tomorrow." Petrov chuckled in the dark. To the political officer? To Major Belov? The one who parrots about temporary difficulties and strengthening army friendship during political instruction? He'll pretend he doesn't understand you. He'll summon Ural, scold him for show. And in the evening, Ural will turn the artist into mincemeat, and you too for airing dirty laundry. It's a system, Andrei. You can't break it from within. Zaitsev was silent. Petrov was right, and the truth of it made him sick. What do you suggest? He finally asked. Petrov paused, as if gathering his courage. Run away, he breathed. Zaitsev froze. The word echoed in the night silence of the barracks like a gunshot. Escape, desertion, court-martial, disciplinary battalion. Shame for the family. The end of everything. Are you crazy? He hissed. Where are we supposed to run to? Winter's coming. Taiga all around. A patrol with dogs will find us frozen stiff in a snowdrift in 2 days. Not all of us, Petrov replied, just as quietly but stubbornly. There's a station 40 kilometers from here. A small one, a siding. Freight trains pass through there, heading east. If we can get to it, we can jump into an empty car. And after that, luck of the draw, to a big city and then disappear. That's insane, Oleg. Zaitsev grabbed his arm. It's a guaranteed court-martial. And here, a guaranteed death. Petrov cut him off. Not physical, then moral. For Goncharenko, maybe physical too. Did you see him today? He's already gone. He's broken. One more evening like tonight, and he'll either hang himself or slit his wrists with a shard. We have to get him out of here. He was talking about Goncharenko, but Zaitsev understood that Petrov himself was at his limit. And many other newbies too. Despair was almost palpable. It hung in the air along with the smell of chlorine and sweat. Who's we? Zaitsev asked. Me, you, and Goncharenko. Maybe a couple of other guys. We don't need many. 3 or 4 of us. In 2 days, our section is assigned to guard duty at the remote pole depot. That's our chance. The post is remote, checks every 4 hours. We can leave unnoticed. Zaitsev released his arm and leaned back on the pillow. His head was throbbing. Escape. The idea was wild, impossible, but at the same time, tempting. To get away from this humiliation, from Ural, from the powerlessness, from the responsibility that was suffocating him, just to disappear into nowhere. I can't, he whispered. I'm a commander. I took an oath. And what has that oath given you? Petrov chuckled bitterly in the dark. The right to watch one of your soldiers being turned into an animal, and you can't do anything? Your position is a sham, Andrei. You're not a commander. You're a scapegoat. They'll blame you for everything if something happens to Goncharenko. They'll say, didn't keep an eye on him, didn't do enough educational work, and Ural will get off scot-free. Think about it, Komod. This isn't freedom, it's salvation. For Stas, and for us. Petrov quietly got up and slipped silently back to his bunk, and Zaitsev remained lying there, staring at the plank ceiling of the barracks. Petrov's words were embedded in his brain like a needle in Goncharenko's finger. Court-martial or death. Not freedom, but salvation. He closed his eyes and saw Goncharenko's face, with frozen tears and a wild spark of despair. Then Ural's face, smug, proprietary, and his own reflection in the dim glass of the supply room. A junior sergeant, a section commander, who can't protect even one of his soldiers. He knew he wouldn't sleep that night. The decision he had to make was more terrifying than any enemy the political officer had told them about. Because the enemy wasn't beyond the border, not in the NATO bloc. The enemy slept 3 bunks away, and tomorrow he would demand his piece of butter and his D-Mob album again. And the price of that album rose higher with each passing night. The price was becoming a human life. "Come on, artist, paint!" Yefreitor, Corporal Sergenko's voice, a demobilized soldier in 6 months, oozed lazy, complacent cruelty. "Me and the boys need a poster. D-Mob is in danger. Ghosts are celebrating. Funny, right? Create, maestro." Andrei Zaitsev, squad leader, clenched his teeth so hard his jaw muscles bulged. He stood at the entrance to the Lenin room, pretending to check the political education schedule on the wall, but his whole being was taut as a string and focused on the scene in the center. There, squatting by a sheet of drawing paper spread out on the floor, sat Stanislav Goncharenko. His slender fingers, accustomed to holding a pencil, awkwardly clutched a blob of red gouache. Beside him stood a jar of murky water. Around him, sprawled on chairs, sat 3 old-timers from the neighboring platoon. Their faces expressed boredom that could turn into aggression at any moment. "Lacking inspiration?" Sergenko drawled, cracking sunflower seeds and spitting the shells directly onto the floor. The husks landed on Stanislav's boots. "You better strain that talent of yours, or we'll help. We have simple, effective methods. Plywood on the back, for example. You'll paint a munch right away. The scream." Stanislav Goncharenko flinched, but didn't raise his head. His nickname, Artist, had sounded almost respectful in the first months of his service. A guy from a Ukrainian town, a graduate of art school, he really did draw amazingly. He designed wall newspapers that the political officer proudly showed to inspectors, painted portraits of officers' wives from photographs for a pack of cigarettes or a weekend pass for a comrade. But for the old-timers, his talent was just another way to humiliate him, to force him to do something absurd, something that broke him inside. I don't know how to do caricatures, Comrade Yefreitor," Stanislav mumbled softly, his voice barely audible. "What?" Sergenko theatrically cupped his hand to his ear. "Speak louder, Boot! You're in the army! Everyone here knows how to do everything, if they're ordered to." Andrei Zaitsev took a step forward. According to regulations, as squad leader, he was supposed to stop the hazing, but the regulations were somewhere there, in the red corner, under glass, and here, in the smoke-filled Lenin room, another law reigned, the law of strength and seniority. Sergenko was a cherry, almost a granddad. Andrei was a dresser from the new guys. An attempt to assert his rights would end badly for him, and even worse, for his men. But he couldn't just stand there like a post, watching this. "Comrade Yefreitor," Andrei tried to make his voice sound even and confident, as if on parade. "My squad has weapons cleaning scheduled. I need Private Goncharenko." Sergenko slowly turned his head. His small eyes took a measuring look at the junior sergeant's stripes on Andrei's shoulder boards. He smirked. "Oh, the dresser has arrived. Saving his soldier? Responsible, commendable. Except we have a more important event here. Political and educational work. We're turning Private Goncharenko into a real army agitator. And the weapons? The weapons can wait. They're metal. They won't be offended." "Right, artist?" Stanislav was silent, hunching his shoulders. Andrei felt a surge of impotent rage boiling inside. He was between a rock and a hard place. Between the regulations, which demanded action, and the animalistic law of the barracks, which advised him not to interfere. He was a commander, but his power was a fiction, a cardboard sword against steel bars. "Let's go, Stas," Andrei said a little louder, addressing his soldier directly. "That's enough." It was a mistake, a direct challenge. Sergenko slowly rose. He was short, but stocky, with a bull neck. "What did you say, Sergeant?" he hissed, approaching Andrei closely. He reeked of sour sweat and cheap tobacco. "Who do you think you're commanding here? Command your ghosts in your cubicle to wash their foot wraps on time. I'm in charge here, got it?" Andrei looked him straight in the eye. "He's going to punch me now," he thought abstractedly. "And then they'll make me the one to blame for fighting with a senior soldier." "I'm his squad leader," Andrei repeated stubbornly, but quieter now. His authority was cracking. "And I'm your granddad," Sergenko snapped. "And as long as I'm serving, you and your whole herd will do what I say. Now, scram, and I don't want to see you. Otherwise, your artist will not only be painting posters, but also licking the latrine bowl clean with his tongue." The humiliation was public and complete. Andrei Zaitsev clenched his fists, turned around, and left. He felt 3 pairs of mocking eyes on his back. He couldn't protect his soldier. He, the commander, was powerless. It stung worse than a slap. He reached the sink and splashed cold water on his face. A grim, gaunt face was reflected in the mirror. "Rag," he said to his reflection. "Not a commander, but a rag." Half an hour later, the old-timers burst into the barracks. Sergenko was in the lead, discussing something merrily with his buddies. Behind them, like a shadow, trailed Stanislav Goncharenko. In his hands he carried his easel, an old battered wooden box that he had miraculously been allowed to keep. He had brought it from home. His pencils, charcoal, pastels, and, most importantly, a folder of drawings were there, portraits of his mother, father, younger sister, landscapes of his hometown, a little piece of home that he cherished like the apple of his eye. "Well, well, artist, show us what treasures you've got there," Sergeyenko drawled, nodding towards the easel. Stanislav clutched the case to his chest. "No, comrade Junior Sergeant, it's personal." "Whoa, the newbie's got personal stuff," another older soldier, nicknamed Demi, guffawed. "Come on, hand it over." He strode towards Stanislav and snatched the case away. The lock clicked open, and the contents spilled onto the dirty barracks floor. Pencils rolled under the bunks, and the drawings fell like autumn leaves on top of them. Ooh, look, he drew his mommy," Demi said, picking up one of the sheets. It was Stanislav's best charcoal portrait, his mother's face, kind, with wrinkles around her eyes. "Your mom's a cutie, artist. Too bad she gave birth to such an ugly son." Stanislav froze, his face turned as white as a sheet. He stared at the portrait in Demi's rough hand, and his eyes held such terror as if he weren't holding a drawing, but his mother's heart. "Give it back," he whispered. At that moment, Andrei Zaitsev, Maxim Kozlov, nicknamed Ural, a burly, taciturn guy, and Oleg Petrov, the St. Petersburger, who managed to maintain an intellectual air even in the army, entered the room. They saw the drawings scattered on the floor and the frozen Stanislav. "What the hell are you doing, you scum?" Maxim Kozlov roared, stepping forward, his huge fists clenched involuntarily. He was the kind of guy who hit first and thought later. "Ural, hold it!" Andrei shouted, grabbing his arm. He knew that if Maxim lost it now, there would be blood, and a court-martial for Maxim. "Let me go, Komod! They're bullying him!" Maxim growled, trying to break free. "Quiet!" Andrei hissed. Demi looked at them mockingly. "Oh, the whole squad's here. Komod, Ural, and... Who's this we got? Professor?" He nodded at Oleg Petrov. "Found some defenders. And what, you guys didn't explain to your artist that there's no personal stuff in the army? Everything in the army is communal, collective, so we're going to get in touch with art now." With these words, he crumpled Stanislav's mother's portrait and threw it on the floor. And then slowly, with relish, he began to stomp on it with his dirty boot, grinding the charcoal into the linoleum. "No!" Stanislav's cry was like the howl of a wounded animal. He lunged forward, but not at Demi, at the floor. He fell to his knees and began trying to gather what was left of the drawing, dirty, torn scraps of paper. Sergeyenko and the third older soldier were laughing. They started kicking the other drawings like soccer balls. Sheets with landscapes tore. The portrait of his little sister ended up under someone's bunk, trampled into the dirt. This wasn't just a fight or humiliation. It was a ritual killing of the soul. They weren't destroying paper. They were destroying Stanislav Goncharenko. Maxim Kozlov could no longer restrain himself. He flung off Andrei's hand and roared, throwing himself at Demi. Oleg Petrov tried to pull the laughing Sergeyenko away. Andrei rushed to Stanislav, trying to pull him up from the floor. "Stas, get up! Get up, I said!" But Stanislav didn't hear him. He sat on his knees in the middle of the barracks, surrounded by fragments of his past life, rocking from side to side. His shoulders trembled slightly. He wasn't crying. His eyes were completely dry and empty, so empty that Andrei was frightened. They were the eyes of a man who had had everything taken from him. A short, furious scuffle broke out. Maxim Kozlov, huge and strong, managed to land one punch in Demi's jaw before the soldiers who had rushed in from other barracks pulled them apart. Sergeyenko, having received a push from Oleg Petrov, brushed himself off disdainfully. "Well, rookies, you've had it," Demi hissed, wiping blood from his split lip. "Your service is going to be hell now, for every single one of you. And you," he pointed a finger at the petrified Stanislav, "you're first in line for me." The older soldiers left, throwing a few more threats as they went. A heavy silence hung in the barracks, broken only by Maxim Kozlov's muffled sobs. He was crying not from pain, but from anger and helplessness, and the soft rustle of paper. It was Stanislav still trying to gather the scraps. Andrei Zaitsev crouched down next to him. "Stas, leave it. Let's go." Stanislav raised his empty eyes to him. My mom," he whispered, and his lips trembled. "I know, Stas. I know. Bastards. But you hold on, you hear? We'll figure something out." Oleg Petrov approached them. His face was pale and focused. He looked at Stanislav, then at Andrei. "We won't figure anything out, Komod," he said quietly but distinctly. "Not in this system. There's no figure out here. There's only endure or run." "Run where, Petersburger?" Maxim snapped, getting up from his bunk. "To the taiga, to the bears, so that in 3 days the special ops guys catch us and put us in the brig for 10 days, and then a court-martial? You're too damn smart. Smarter than swinging your fists and putting everyone in the firing line," Oleg replied coldly. "Your punch to Demi's face is now going to cost Stas his health, or maybe his life." Maxim wanted to say something in response, but he cut himself off. Because Oleg was right. His outburst had only made the situation worse. Andrei helped Stanislav to his feet. He was as light as a child. He sat him down on the bunk. "Lie down. Rest." Stanislav obediently lay down and turned to the wall, pulling the blanket over his head. He curled up into a ball, as if trying to disappear. In the evening, after lights out, when the barracks was plunged into sleep, filled with snores, the creaking of bunks, and mumbling in dreams, Andrei Zaitsev lay with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He could hear Maxim Kozlov tossing and turning on the neighboring bunk. He could hear Oleg Petrov breathing softly, and he couldn't hear anything coming from Stanislav Goncharenko's bunk. There was absolute dead silence there. Andrei felt responsible for everything, for failing to protect him, for not stopping Maxim, for his rank as squad leader proving to be just an empty title. He remembered Stanislav's face when he looked at the trampled portrait of his mother, and that look, empty, burned to ashes, remained before his eyes. In this silence, in this stale air, permeated with the smell of foot wraps, sweat, and hopelessness, Andrei Zaitsev realized for the first time that the army was not only about regulations, discipline, and defending the motherland. It was also a machine that ground people down, especially those who were different from the others, those who had a soul that could be trampled under a dirty boot. He thought about Oleg's words, endure or run. To endure meant to watch Stanislav being finished off, day after day, methodically and relentlessly. And to run? That seemed like madness. Suicide of another kind. Somewhere in the far corner of the barracks, one of the old-timers chuckled quietly. This laughter grated on Andrei's nerves. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in his service, felt not just anger or resentment. He felt fear, not for himself, for Stanislav, for what might happen in that dead silence emanating from his bunk. He realized that something had broken completely today, both in Stanislav and in himself. The naive boy who had believed in justice and duty to command was dying that night in the stuffy construction battalion barracks, and in his place, someone else was being born, hard, angry, and understanding that in this world there are situations where there are simply no right answers. Squad, rise and shine. 5 minutes on the parade ground, dress code number 4. Let's go, move it, sleepyheads. Andrei Zaitsev's voice, the squad leader nicknamed Komod, dresser, cracked into a falsetto. He himself wasn't fully awake yet, but the regulations drove him forward, forcing him to feign energy and a commanding severity. The usual morning hubbub filled the barracks, the creaking of bunks, the shuffling of boots, muffled cursing. The air was thick and stuffy, smelling of foot wraps, cheap shipper, cologne, and the sleep of hundreds of young men. Andrei scanned his squad. Maxim Kozlov, a burly guy from the Urals, hence the nickname Ural, was already pulling on his boots, his square face as gloomy as the sky. Next to him, moving with precise accuracy, Oleg Petrov, an intellectual guy from Leningrad, nicknamed Petersburgian, was getting dressed. He always did everything silently, with a slight, disdainful detachment, as if what was happening was part of a bad play. But one bunk was empty, neatly made, but empty. "Where's Goncharenko?" Andrei barked, feeling everything inside him clench with a bad feeling. Maxim Kozlov spat on the floor with malice. "Where would he be, Commander?" "In the drawing room, most likely. The old-timers probably gave him the night shift again, made him re-sew the collar linings for their entire intake. Until morning." Andrei cursed under his breath. Stanislav Goncharenko, a quiet and awkward guy nicknamed Artist for his love of drawing, was his main headache. He didn't fit in, at all. In this world of brute force, primitive instincts, and a rigid hierarchy, his delicate mental state was like a target. The old-school old-timers, those with only 6 months left to serve, saw him as an ideal object for bullying. He couldn't fight back. He didn't know how to snap back. He just silently endured, and that made them even angrier. "I told him yesterday to come to me if they started again," Andrei muttered, fastening his belt. "And what would you have done, Komod?" Oleg Petrov smirked, not looking up. His voice was quiet, but it cut like a scalpel. "Gone to the sergeant major, to the political officer, so they could put him in the red corner to draw posters until he's discharged. His own newbies would drown him in the latrine the first night for being a snitch. You know the rules." Andrei knew. He was Komod, the squad leader, a ridiculous position that gave the illusion of power. On the one hand, he was pressured by officers and sergeants demanding perfect discipline. On the other hand, the old-timers, who didn't give a damn about his junior sergeant stripes. And from below, his own squad, the same half-timers as himself, expecting him to protect them, which he couldn't. A hammer, an anvil, and him, Andrei Zaitsev, between them. a piece of soft iron. "Cut the chatter," he snapped, trying to hide his own confusion. "Kozlov, run to the drawing room. Drag Goncharenko here, now." Maxim Ural, groaning, got up and, clattering his boots, left the barracks. Andrei remained standing in the middle of the row of cots, feeling Pitarets's scrutinizing gaze on him. Oleg Petrov made the bed with geometric precision, every corner a perfect right angle. "He'll break, Andrei," Oleg said quietly, moving closer. "Sooner or later, this machine will grind him up and spit him out. He's not made of the right stuff. He doesn't even eat his morning butter, he gives it away. Says he can't stomach it." "I'll talk to him, again," Andrei replied stubbornly. "We need to, somehow, get him assigned to the infirmary or something, for a couple of weeks. Let him rest." "Useless," Oleg snapped. "He'll come back, and they'll start with redoubled force. For playing sick. You can't show weakness here. Here you either become an animal or you croak. There's no third option." At that moment, Maxim Kozlov burst into the barracks, pale as a sheet. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wide with horror. "Komod, there's the artist!" Andrei felt an icy wave rise from his heels to his throat. "What's there? Talk!" "He's in the drawing room," Maxim swallowed. "On a belt? From a rifle?" Time stopped. The hum in the barracks subsided. Everyone nearby froze, turning their heads towards them. Andrei looked at Maxim and couldn't believe it, couldn't force his brain to accept this information. "You're lying," he exhaled. "Go see for yourself." Ural's voice trembled. "He's there, hanging, and a note on the stool." Andrei, as if in a dream, moved towards the exit. His legs were like cotton. He pushed past the soldiers frozen in his path, not seeing their faces. The drawing room, a small, hot room, which always smelled of stale foot wraps and dampness. The door was ajar. He pushed it open and froze on the threshold. Stanislav Goncharenko was there. Absurd, in a tunic slipped to the side, with his head unnaturally tilted towards his shoulder. An overturned stool lay at his feet. The body swayed slightly in the draft. Andrei Zaitsev looked at the boots dangling in the air and saw before his eyes not a soldier, but the same guy who, 2 months ago, had shown him his drawings in a notebook. Landscapes of his native village, a portrait of his mother. He drew them with a stub of a chemical pencil on any scrap of paper he could find. The last time Andrei had seen it, the old-timers had torn this notebook from him and, laughing, used the pages for kindling in the smoking room. Stanislav hadn't said a word then, just watched as his world burned. Nearby, on a second stool, lay a neatly folded sheet of paper torn from a notebook for political studies. Andrei stepped inside, trying not to look at the body. His hands trembled as he picked up the note. Crooked, erratic letters. "Mom, I'm sorry, I can't take it anymore. This isn't life. There are no people here." And below, in a different handwriting, firmer, almost like a poster, "I ask that no one be blamed for my death." The last phrase was like a slap in the face. Regulations, style, official, learned in political studies. Even in leaving, he was trying to do everything by the book. Footsteps sounded behind him. It was Oleg Petrov. He looked over Andrei's shoulder, read the note, and said quietly, without emotion, "That's it. The end. Curtain." Andrei crumpled the note in his fist. Rage, hot and blind, flooded him, driving out shock and fear. "Who?" he growled, turning to the soldiers frozen in the doorway. "Who was he yesterday with?" Everyone was silent. They lowered their eyes. The law of collective responsibility was stronger than the fear of the squad leader, stronger than conscience, stronger than anything. "I'm asking who?" Andrei shouted, and his voice broke. He grabbed the first freshie he saw by the chest, a young kid with frightened eyes. "Were you there? Did you see? Talk!" The guy shook his head, mumbling something incoherently. "Cool it, Komod," Maxim Kozlov said firmly, pulling him away. "Now's not the time. The brass will be here any minute, and they'll make you the fall guy." He was right. Andrei was the squad leader. An emergency in his unit. He hadn't kept an eye on things, hadn't watched out for things, hadn't shown sensitivity, hadn't conducted educational work. They'll put all the blame on him, and the special services guys will start dragging everyone in for questioning. Everyone. "We have to run," Oleg Petrov suddenly said. His voice was just as calm, but a cold fire burned in his eyes. Andrei stared at him. "Where to? Are you out of your mind, Interrogates? From here, anywhere, to the taiga, to the border, even to the moon. Do you see what's happening here? Today it's him, tomorrow it's one of us. Ural, do you want 2 more years of this? Polishing the boots of bastards who drove a man to hang himself?" Maxim Kozlov, usually slow and deliberate, answered immediately this time. His fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "I don't. I'm ready to—" "Exactly," Oleg interrupted. "And if you touch them, court-martial, disciplinary battalion. If we stay and keep quiet, the special services will harass us, and they'll still find someone to blame, and they'll make it us. They'll say we drove him to it. Group bullying, non-regulation relationships within the new recruits, and the old-timers will get away scot-free. They always have everything sewn up." Interrogates' logic was impeccable and terrifying. They were trapped. The artist's death had slammed it shut for good. "What escape?" Andrei tried to regain his commanding tone, but it didn't work. His voice sounded hoarse and uncertain. "They'll catch us with dogs in 3 hours. And then what? Court-martial for desertion? 10 years. And what about our families? Shame for life. My father was a veteran." "And this isn't shame?" Oleg flared up. "To return in 2 years a broken bastard who saw his comrade hang himself and said nothing? Who learned to lick the asses of the old-timers to get an extra piece of bread? Isn't that shame? Is that, in your opinion, the army makes a man out of a boy? It makes him either a slave or livestock." Oleg's words hit hard. Andrei remembered the political classes, the posters of "The Honor and Valor of the Soviet Warrior," the deputy commander's speeches about sacred duty, and this drying room, and the body of Stanislav Goncharenko, and the note, "Lies and Truth," 2 sides of the same coin. "There are 3 of us," Oleg continued, his voice lower, more persuasive. "Ural is strong. I can figure out the route. I've always been good at geography. And you, Komod, you're the commander. You know how to make decisions. And you have access to the armory, at least for the duration of your guard duty." Andrei went cold. One thing was escape. Another was escape with weapons. That's not just desertion anymore. That's treason. A firing squad during a special period, and the Cold War was one continuous special period. "No," he said firmly. "No weapons." "With bare hands against dogs and patrols?" Oleg sneered. "We won't even make it to the first village." "I said no!" Andrei roared. At that moment, not a boy awoke in him, but the very Komod they were trying to cultivate in him. Responsible. Trying to be fair, even in hell. "If we run, it'll be so we don't become murderers. We're not them." He looked at the artist's body. He didn't become a murderer either. He just left. At the far end of the corridor, the sound of several pairs of boots thudded, and the booming voice of Warrant Officer Sergenko rang out. What's all the commotion here? Now, break it up, Zaitsev!
To me.
Decide, Oleg Petrov threw at Andrei and Maxim. Right now. Either we go to interrogation with the special investigator and drown each other, or we leave tonight. There's no third option. The artist made his choice. Now it's our turn. The warrant officer was already at the entrance to the drawing room. He glanced inside, and his red, weathered face instantly turned gray. He looked at Andrei, then at the others. There was no anger, no surprise in his eyes, only fatigue, the endless, universal fatigue of a man who had seen this before.
Zaitsev,
he breathed.
Motherfucker.
Andrei Zaitsev stood, clenching Stanislav Goncharenko's suicide note in his sweaty fist. He looked at the warrant officer, at the dead man, at his comrades, and for the first time in all his service, he felt that the anvil beneath him had cracked and the hammer above his head was about to fall for the last time. And he had to decide, put his head under the blow or try to slip away, even if running meant running into nowhere. Someone was shaking him by the shoulder persistently, angrily. Andrei Zaitsev, squad leader, whom his comrades simply called Komod, surfaced from a heavy, sticky dream, where he was marching across the parade ground again and again, and his boots were filling with lead. In the darkness of the barracks, pierced only by the dim light of the duty officer's lamp, a massive shadow loomed over him. "Get up, Komod. We need to talk," hissed the familiar Ural drawl of Maxim Kozlov, a huge guy nicknamed Ural. Andrei sat up on the bed, throwing off the prickly blanket. His heart pounded anxiously. Nighttime wake-ups never boded well. Either the old-timers had come up with another game, or something serious had happened. Judging by Ural's face, it was the latter. "Where?" Andrei asked in a whisper, pulling on his riding breeches. "In the drawing room. Petersburg and the artist are already there." The drawing room, the holy of holies of soldier life. A room reeking of sour sweat, foot wrappings, and cheap shag tobacco, where you could hide from the all-seeing eye of sergeants and officers for a few minutes. Their small, suffocating fortress. They slipped past the dozing duty officer. It was hot and humid in the drawing room. Uniforms and foot wrappings hung on the ropes, casting ugly dancing shadows on the walls. Oleg Petrov, an intellectual from Leningrad, nicknamed Petersburg for his glasses and habit of quoting books no one had read, was squatting by the hot pipe. He was nervously twisting the edge of his uniform tunic. In the darkest corner, huddled up, almost merging with the wall, sat Stanislav Goncharenko, the artist. A talented guy from near Poltava, who before the army had painted murals in rural clubs and now stared blankly at one point. His face, once lively and expressive, had turned into a gray mask. "Well, is everyone here?" Maxim Kozlov began in a low voice, closing the heavy door. He didn't beat around the bush. Ural never did. "Listen up, guys. Enough. I can't take it anymore. We're getting out of here." The air in the drawing room became even thicker. Andrei Zaitsev felt a chill run down his spine, despite the stuffiness. Escape. The most terrible word in the army after court-martial. "Are you out of your mind, Ural?" Oleg Petrov was the first to break the silence. His voice trembled, but he tried to speak rationally, as always. "Where can we run? Winter's just around the corner. The taiga's all around us. In 3 days, patrols will catch us, or wolves will eat us. And then what? Disciplinary battalion at best, and most likely, a tribunal. Treason, defection. You know what the political officer drones on about. 5 to 7 years on top of our service." "7 years in the zone is better than 3 years here," Maxim snarled. He stepped towards Peteretsky, looming over him. "Have you forgotten how Demble made the artist lick his foot wrappings yesterday? Forgotten how they made us catch butterflies until dawn? How they busted your plywood until you coughed up blood? Because they didn't like your Leningrad accent? I haven't forgotten. Every night I fall asleep and think about how to strangle that piece of scum with a pillow. But he's not the only one. There's a whole pack of them here. Warrant officers, they all see it and say nothing. It's profitable for them. We're free labor for them. Cattle. Andrei was silent. As the squad leader, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. On one side were the old-timers and sergeants who demanded that he maintain order, which in their language meant helping them torment the new recruits. On the other side were his own guys, whom he was supposed to protect, but couldn't. Every attempt he made to intervene ended the same way. He himself would be demonstratively taught a lesson at evening roll call, and his squad would get a fun night with hundreds of squats and push-ups. His authority as squad leader was a fiction, a pathetic illusion of power. He was as much a slave as everyone else, only with stripes on his epaulets. Maxim is right about one thing, Andrei said, trying to make his voice sound firm, commander-like. We can't take this anymore. But running, Oleg is also right. It's a one-way ticket. To prison. Our families. Have you thought about your mother, Maxim? What will happen to her when she receives a letter not from her son, the soldier, but from an investigator from the military prosecutor's office? And have you thought about my mother, squad leader? Ural snapped back, and unconcealed pain rang in his voice. She thinks I'm defending the motherland here, becoming a man, but I'm cleaning the floors with a toothbrush here, and I'm afraid to go to the toilet because the old-timers are waiting there. I lie to her in my letters. I lie that everything is fine, and I want to die. Let her visit me in the zone, rather than receive me at home in a coffin. Something stirred in the corner. Stanislav Goncharenko raised his head. His eyes were empty, burned out. He wasn't looking at them, but through them. Run, he whispered so quietly that he could barely be heard above the hum of the pipes. But where to run, Maxim? Everyone turned to him. The artist had rarely spoken lately. Every word came with visible difficulty, as if he were pulling it out of himself along with a piece of his soul. Where? To civilian life. Home, Ural exclaimed fervently. We'll hide, sit it out. We'll take crackers and canned goods from the food depot. We'll get to the railway and then— No, Stanislav interrupted him. His voice grew stronger, a metallic sound of despair ringing in it. You don't understand. Where do we run from? This! He gestured around the cramped, smelly drawing room, but everyone understood that he meant more than just it. He was talking about the barracks, the parade ground, the mess hall where the old-timers took their butter and sugar, about the endless humiliations, about the fear that had eaten its way under their skin and become a part of them. It's everywhere, in my head. I close my eyes, and I see their mugs. I try to draw in my notebook, and all I get are gallows, small, crooked. He fell silent, breathing heavily. Oleg Petrov took off his glasses and wiped the lenses. Andrei Zaitsev felt everything inside him clench into an icy ball. He looked at the artist and saw not just a broken soldier. He saw a man standing on the edge of an abyss. Running away isn't the answer, Stanislav continued in his dead voice. They'll catch us. They'll bring us back. And it will be even worse. 100 times worse. Then they'll stop treating us like human beings altogether. They'll take revenge. Every day, every hour, until we croak. So what do you suggest? Sit and wait until they turn us into cripples? Maxim Kozlov exploded. Stanislav Goncharenko slowly rose to his feet. He was thin, almost transparent in the dim light. He looked directly into Andrei's eyes. There was no fear or anger in his gaze, only bottomless, all-consuming weariness. I'm not suggesting anything, he said quietly. I've already decided everything for myself. There's nowhere to run. You can't run away from yourself and live like this. I won't. There's another way out. A quick one. The silence in the drawing room became deafening. The word suicide was not uttered, but it hung in the hot, stuffy air like an executioner's axe. Andrei looked at Stanislav and suddenly realized that this was not a threat, not a cry for help, not an attempt to attract attention. It was a sentence. Final, and not subject to appeal. A sentence that Stanislav had passed on himself. The idea of escape proposed by Ural with all its recklessness and desperation suddenly seemed like child's play compared to the cold, calm determination in the artist's eyes. What are you talking about, Stas? Oleg Petrov stammered, his face turned white. Have you gone crazy, ruining your life because of these bastards? It's already ruined, Oleg, Goncharenko replied lifelessly. It's gone. They burned it out. Inside it's empty, like a barracks after lights out. Only darkness and snoring. I don't want to wake up anymore. I'm tired. At that moment, Andrei Zaitsev ceased to be Komod. All his affected commander's severity, all that pathetic attempt to appear authoritative, fell away from him. Standing before him was his friend, his comrade, who was about to die. And it wasn't just the grandfathers who were to blame. He, Andrei, was also to blame, because he, the commander, had failed to protect him. They were all to blame for their submissiveness, their silence. No, Andrei said firmly. His voice didn't waver. He stepped toward Stanislav and stood between him and the others. No other options. Do you hear me, artist? None. And what are you going to do, Komod? Stanislav smirked crookedly. Order me to live. Private Goncharenko, I order you not to hang yourself in the toilet and not to slit your wrists on guard duty. Is that it? Your orders are worthless here. You know that yourself. It was a blow to the gut, direct and precise. Andrei swallowed hard. I won't order you, he said more quietly, but with a new, unfamiliar strength. I won't give you to them, neither alive nor dead. Suddenly the door to the drawing room crashed open. Sergeant Romanov, Dembel, the one who had artist washing foot wraps, stood on the threshold, sleepy, angry, in just a t-shirt and riding breeches. Aha, the dovecoats assembled, he drawled with a vile smirk. A meeting of the spirits? What, you devils made a pact to make service easier? Now everyone out. Komod, you're first. I'm going to personally teach you, you lousy commander, how to look after your personnel. Maxim Kozlov tensed, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He was ready to jump on the sergeant right now. Andrei put his hand on his shoulder, stopping him. Let's go, he said quietly, looking not at the sergeant, but at Stanislav. Let's go. This conversation isn't over. They left the drawing room and stepped into the semi-darkness of the barracks. Dembel shoved Andrei in the chest. So, Zaitsev, you decided that those stripes give you power. You're just as much of a spirit as they are, just with epaulets. Now we're going to beat that arrogance out of you. Now assume the push-up position. You'll be singing Katyusha and doing push-ups for me until Reveille. Andrei silently lowered himself to the cold concrete floor. He felt the gazes of Ural in Petersburg, but he was looking into the darkness, towards where Stanislav Goncharenko had crawled into his bunk. The escape plan had crumbled, turned to dust. Now there was another plan, much more important and frightening. He started doing push-ups. 1, 2, 3. With each movement, with each drop of sweat dripping onto the floor, a single thought grew stronger in his head. The escape plan was foolishness, but Ural's idea was fundamentally correct. Act. Don't endure. Don't wait. Only you had to act not against the taiga and patrols, but against those who were here, nearby, against those who had decided that they had the right to break other people's lives. I won't give you to them, he repeated mentally, looking into the darkness where Artist was hiding. The army was supposed to make a man out of him. Well, it seemed to be on the right track. Only this path didn't lead through drill training and political indoctrination. It led through the drawing room, through the empty eyes of his friend, and through the cold concrete floor of the barracks onto which his sweat was dripping. And Andrei Zaitsev, Komod, felt for the first time in his entire service that he was truly a commander, not of a squad, but the commander of his own destiny, and maybe of the destiny of that guy who had decided that there was nowhere left for him to run. "Zaitsev, to the company commander, on the double!" The orderly's voice, sharp and frightened, ripped Andrei Zaitsev from his heavy, sticky torpor right on the stool in the supply room. He blinked, trying to shake off the numbness. The time was around 3 in the morning. No alarm had been sounded, so there had been an incident. His heart plummeted into his stomach, a cold lump. An incident in his squad. And he, the squad leader, Sergeant Zaitsev, a.k.a. Komod, was going to catch hell for it now. "What happened?" he asked hoarsely, pulling on his boots. "I don't know, Comrade Sergeant. The company commander ordered you urgently. He's angry as hell. And pale." Andrei ran down the echoing corridor of the barracks, past the bodies sprawled out in a heap. The air was stuffy, smelling of sweat, foot wraps, and that special, incomparable barracks smell. There was a light on in the staff office. Captain Siderchuk, their company commander, stood with his back to the door, his hands in the pockets of his riding breeches. Next to him, unnaturally straight, stood the deputy commander for political affairs, Major Belikon. The deputy commander's face was like stone, carved from gray granite. "Comrade Captain, Sergeant Zaitsev reporting as ordered," Andrei reported, standing at attention. The company commander slowly turned around. His eyes were red, inflamed. He nodded silently towards the coat rack. "Take your greatcoat. Let's go." They walked in silence across the unit's territory, plunged into a frosty December night. The snow crunched under their boots with a nasty, squealing sound. No one uttered a word. Andrei instinctively felt that it wasn't about drunkenness or a fight, or even being AWOL. This silent escort of 2 officers, this nighttime walk to the very edge of the service area where the stoker was smoking its chimney, all this screamed of disaster. At the stokers, they were met by the warrant officer in charge of the bathhouse and laundry. He was smoking, hiding the cigarette in his huge fist, and when he saw the officers, he threw it away, grinding it into the snow. "There." He waved his hand towards the slightly open door, from which steam was pouring and heat emanating. "The stoker found him, an hour ago." The company commander took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump into icy water, and stepped inside. The political officer followed him. Andrei, feeling his legs weaken, forced himself to take a step. Inside it was hot and dim. A bare light bulb under the ceiling barely dispersed the gloom, snatching from it piles of coal, cast iron furnace doors from which orange flames leaped, and a body. Stanislav Goncharenko, their artist, was hanging in a noose made from his own trouser belt, slung over a heating pipe. He was in just his tunic shirt, barefoot. One boot lay nearby, the other, neatly placed, stood against the wall. His head was unnaturally tilted to the side, as if he were listening to the hum in the pipes. His face, which Andrei remembered as alive, eternally embarrassed, with a kind, almost childlike smile, was now bluish and unfamiliar. In the dim light, it seemed that he wasn't hanging, but floating in the hot haze of the boiler room. Andrei froze. The air ran out. He looked at the neatly placed boot and couldn't look away. That detail, that last, desperate attempt to maintain order before stepping into chaos, cut to the heart more than the sight of the body itself. He remembered how just 2 days ago Stanislav had shown him a new drawing in his worn notebook, a portrait of his mother. "When I get back, Andrei," he had whispered, "I'll give it to her. I'll tell her that for 2 years I've been thinking only of her." "Zaitsev!" the company commander roared, snapping him out of his stupor. "Is that your man?" "Yes, comrade captain, Private Goncharenko." "Didn't keep an eye on him, Sergeant?" the political officer Belokon asked, insinuatingly, almost in a whisper, without looking at Andrei. His gaze was fixed on the noose. Andrei began and fell silent. What could he say? That Stanislav had been tormented from day one? That the old-timers from the previous draft had made him their personal errand boy? That they made him wash their uniforms at night, polish their boots to a mirror shine, and took away parcels from home? That Maxim Kozlov, nicknamed Ural, had almost broken the face of one of the old-timers yesterday when he forced Stanislav to do push-ups in a puddle of dirty water in the washroom? That he, Sergeant Zaitsev, commode, chest of drawers, had tried to protect him, but each time he ran into a solid wall of collective responsibility and unwritten army laws. That the company commander himself had told him, "Zaitsev, don't interfere. Hazing is steam that needs to be released, otherwise the boiler will explode. The main thing is no injuries." Well, here you go, comrade captain. No injuries, just a corpse. "There's a note in his pocket," the warrant officer said dully. "I didn't touch it." The political officer approached, and with a gesture of distaste, used 2 fingers to pull a sheet of notebook paper, folded in quarters, from the pocket of the tunic shirt. He unfolded it and held it up to the light. His face didn't change, but the muscles in his cheekbones began to jump. "Please don't blame anyone," he read in a monotonous voice. "I'm just tired. Mom, forgive me." That's all. A lie. A blatant, monstrous lie. Andrei knew that Stanislav couldn't have written just tired. He would have written the truth. He would have named names. Either the note had been replaced, or he had been forced to write it. "All right, listen up." The company commander turned to them. In his eyes was a mixture of fear and anger. Fear for his rank and anger at this quiet boy, who with one act had put a cross on his career. "The investigator and the prosecutor's office will be here soon. Zaitsev, your job is to stay out of it. Don't open your mouth to anyone. Tell the soldiers, an accident, carbon monoxide poisoning, understood?" "But comrade captain..." "I said, understood!" Sidorchuk shrieked, poking Andrei in the chest with his finger. "You, Sergeant, are responsible for your squad. You are his commander, and you'll be the first to go on trial for driving him to it if anyone breathes a word about hazing. I'll wring you dry, Zaitsev, but I'll get out of this. Got it?" The political officer Belokon placed a heavy hand on the captain's shoulder. "Calm down, comrade captain. Nerves. Sergeant Zaitsev understands everything. He's a conscious guy. Isn't that right, Sergeant? You don't want your mother, like the mother of this..." He nodded at the body. "To have her heart broken when she finds out that her son is going away for 10 years? Andrei looked into the cold, empty eyes of the political officer and felt icy sweat crawling down his spine. This wasn't just a threat. It was a sentence. They were offering him a deal. Keep quiet and you'll stay free, and we'll blame everything on mental instability and personal problems. Speak up, and we'll make you the main culprit. You're commode. You're responsible." "Yes, sir," he squeezed out, feeling the taste of rust in his mouth. "An accident." He walked back to the barracks as if in a dream. His legs carried him on their own. He passed the duty officer, walked along the rows of bunks. His squad wasn't asleep. Maxim Kozlov was sitting on his bunk, huge like a bear, and staring at one point. Next to him, huddled up, sat Oleg Petrov, Pitersky, from St. Petersburg, an intellectual in boots who was always reading books and arguing with the political officer in political education classes. They were waiting for him. Andrei silently walked up to Stanislav's bunk. It was perfectly made. The edging on the blanket was perfect. His sketchbook lay on the nightstand. Andrei picked it up. His hands were shaking. He opened the last page. There was no portrait of his mother. There was only one drawing, hastily done, with thick, jagged lines. A fence. And behind it, a bird flying away into the gray sky. At the bottom, one word was scrawled in crooked letters: freedom. He slammed the sketchbook shut. "Well?" Maxim asked dully, not raising his head. "Goncharenko." Andrei's voice cracked. "He's in the boiler room. He hanged himself." Oleg Petrov covered his face with his hands. Maxim clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Bastards," he growled. "I told you they'd break him. I told you, Komod. We should have paved them over yesterday." "It's too late, Ural," Andrei said quietly. He felt empty. All his feigned sergeant's strictness, all his attempts to be a fair commander, had crumbled to dust. He hadn't protected him. He had failed. He turned out to be as much of a coward as everyone else. They said, "An accident. Carbon monoxide poisoning." "What?" Maxim jumped up. "They want to smear dirt on him too? Make him out to be an idiot who doesn't know how to use a stove?" "They want to cover their asses," Oleg interjected, removing his hands from his face. His eyes were dry and angry. "An incident in the unit before an inspection from the district is a death sentence for the company commander and the political officer. They'll do anything to pass it off as suicide due to personal reasons, and they'll force us to keep quiet. You, Andrei, first." "They already have." Zaitsev nodded. He sat down on his bunk, feeling a shiver run through him. "They threatened a court-martial for driving him to it." Silence hung in the orderly room, heavy, viscous. Everyone was thinking their own thoughts, but the thought was the same. Stanislav had found his way out. Horrible, final, but his own. And what was left for them? To endure further? To wait for the old-timers, frightened by what had happened, to become even more savage and choose a new victim? Or, until the special investigators started dragging everyone in for questioning, looking for unhealthy sentiments in the ranks, and pinned the blame on one of them? "I told you!" Maxim suddenly broke the silence. His voice was even and terrifying. "There are only two ways out of here, either into the ground, like Stas, or over the fence." Oleg looked up at him. "Are you serious? A break? In winter? Into the taiga? They'll catch us in 3 days, and then it's definitely a court-martial, desertion in wartime." "Isn't this a court-martial?" Maxim snapped back. "This is slow death, every day, every night. They killed Stas. Tomorrow they'll go after one of us, and this one," he nodded towards Andrei, "will stand and watch because they threatened him with a wagging finger. Right, Komod?" Andrei winced at the nickname. Now it sounded like an insult. Commander. Commander of what? A herd being led to slaughter? He looked at his hands. The hands that should have protected were tied, not by chains, by fear. Fear for himself, for his mother, for a future that might not exist. He remembered Stanislav's face, his quiet voice, his drawings, the bird flying into the sky. Freedom. "Oleg is right," Andrei said slowly, raising his head. His gaze was heavy. "They'll catch us. But Ural is also right. Staying here is the same as putting your head in a noose, only slower." He stood up, went to the window, and looked at the black square of the parade ground, illuminated by a lone spotlight on a pole. There, beyond the barbed wire fence, was another life. Maybe not better, but different. A life where you weren't beaten at night, humiliated, forced to eat laundry soap, and driven to suicide. "When do the old-timers go on guard duty?" he asked without turning around. Maxim and Oleg exchanged glances. "The day after tomorrow. Their whole draft goes on for 24 hours. The duty officer is a warrant officer who doesn't give a damn about anything as long as he gets vodka," Maxim replied. He understood. "So we have 2 days." Andrei turned around. There was no more confusion in his eyes. There was a cold, ringing emptiness in which a desperate resolve was beginning to form. "Food, clothes, a map. Oleg, you're the smartest one. Plan the route to the nearest station. Maxim, your job is to get civilian clothes and some food. I'll take care of the map and the diversions." He was no longer Komod, trying to play by the rules of a rotten system. He was the commander of a group preparing for their last battle, for a flight into nowhere. "Are you with us?" Maxim asked, looking him straight in the eye. Andrei Zaitsev opened Stanislav's sketchbook to the page with the bird. He looked at it for a long time, as if memorizing every line. Then he carefully tore out the page and tucked it into the inside pocket of his tunic, right next to his heart. "I'm not just with you," he said hoarsely. "I'll lead you. We owe Stas at least this, so that he didn't die in vain." He was hanging in the washroom. Andrei Zaitsev, the squad leader, whom they called Komod behind his back for his perpetually furrowed brows and attempts to organize everything, looked at him and couldn't breathe. The belt, roughly thrown over the heating pipe under the ceiling, the blue, bloated face, the wide-open, unseeing eyes of Stanislav Goncharenko, their company's artist, the thin neck, unnaturally elongated. The feet in worn-down boots barely touched the tiled floor, slick with soapy water and littered with cigarette butts. The first thought was to cut him down, to lunge forward, hoist him up, loosen the noose. But the body was already cold, stiff. Andrei reached out, touched a boot, and immediately recoiled. The cold wasn't just physical. It was the cold of non-existence, an absolute, final point. "Goncharenko," Andrei whispered, and his own voice sounded alien, creaky. "Stas." He stepped back, bumping his spine against the cold wall lined with chipped tiles. The sharp smell of chlorine, dampness, and something else hit him. Something Swedish, nauseating. The smell of death. Footsteps sounded from behind the door. The orderly. "Comrade Sergeant, are you going to be much longer in there?" a young voice called out. Andrei couldn't answer. He just stood there, pressed against the wall, watching the body sway in the draft. The door creaked. A young newbie froze on the threshold, his face instantly lengthening, his eyes widening in horror. He opened his mouth, but instead of a scream, only a strangled croak escaped. "Back," Andrei ordered mechanically. "Don't let anyone in. Run to the company duty officer, now." The soldier stumbled, turned, and bolted. His heavy footsteps echoed in the morning silence of the barracks, and Andrei stayed, alone with this, with his failure. He was his commander. He should have seen, should have known. "Tell me everything, Zaitsev." The deputy political officer's office, that of Major Belsky, was permeated with the smell of cheap tobacco and furniture polish. On the wall was a portrait of Brezhnev, on the desk a red bust of Lenin, and a stack of fresh Red Star newspapers. Belsky himself, a heavy man with a puffy face and the heavy gaze of small eyes, sat opposite him, staring intently at Andrei. Beside him, by the window, stood Captain Roshchin, the company commander, lean, trim, with a face as if carved from stone. "What is there to tell, Comrade Major?" "Tell me everything, Sergeant." Belsky tapped his knuckles on the desk. "From the very beginning. Why did Private Goncharenko, Stanislav Igorovich, a Komsomol member, a fighter you were entrusted with, decide to cut his young life short? What's going on in your squad, Zaitsev? Huh? Andrei swallowed. His mouth was dry. He saw not officers before him, but judges. The sentence had already been passed. All that remained was to draw up the record. There was order in the squad, Comrade Major. I didn't allow any hazing. You didn't allow it? Belsky sneered. And what's this then? Political short-sightedness? A lapse in vigilance? A soldier hangs himself in the washroom and his squad leader didn't allow it? Do you understand that this is an emergency of national scale? That because of you, Zaitsev, the whole division will be turned upside down? Inspections, commissions from the district. You screwed us all, Sergeant. All of us. Captain Roshchin coughed. Andrei, tell it like it is. Were there any conflicts? Maybe he didn't get along with someone. Did he receive bad letters from home? Andrei remembered Goncharenko, a quiet, intelligent guy from Leningrad who really was an artist. He was always drawing something in his notebook. Fellow soldiers, barracks landscapes, caricatures of officers. He was a stranger in this environment. Too sensitive, too vulnerable, a perfect target. He was withdrawn, Andrei began cautiously, especially lately. Withdrawn? The deputy political officer snapped. And you, as a commander, as a future communist, what did you do to help your comrade? Did you have a talk? Look into his soul? Did you report up the chain of command that something was wrong with the soldier? Or were you just interested in wearing your sergeant's stripes in peace? The hammer. Here it was, the hammer coming down on his head. Andrei was silent, gritting his teeth. What could he say? That the old-timers from the neighboring platoon, who had 6 months left to serve, had made Goncharenko's life unbearable? That they forced him to wash their foot wraps at night, give them his butter from the mess hall, polish their belt buckles until they shone? That they called him Rooster because he refused to participate in their cruel games? If he said it, he would be accused of failing to protect his soldier. That he, a commander, had allowed hazing in his own squad. If he remained silent, he would be accused of negligence and concealment, a dead end. I had talks, Comrade Major. He said everything was fine. He was just homesick. You're lying, Belsky roared. You're lying through your teeth. An investigator from the special department will talk to you differently. There, you'll quickly remember who was pushing him to it and when, and who was covering it up. Take note, Zaitsev. If it turns out that you knew and kept silent, tribunal. And you won't be going home, but to the disciplinary battalion, for about 3 years. They'll quickly knock the commander's arrogance out of you there. Do you understand me? Andrei nodded. Cold sweat trickled down his back. The disciplinary battalion, it was worse than prison. You're dismissed, Captain Roshchin said, turning away to the window. Go back to your unit, and not a peep out of anyone. Everyone will be questioned. Every single one. Andrei rose on trembling legs, made a sharp about-face, and left the office. The headquarters corridor seemed endless. He walked, looking straight ahead, and saw only one thing. Stas Goncharenko's blue face. He hadn't saved him. He, Komod, responsible and fair, had simply turned out to be a coward. He was afraid of the old-timers, afraid of the officers, afraid of disrupting the fragile semblance of order, and the price of that fear is a human life. A dead silence hung in the barracks. Soldiers sat on their bunks staring at the floor. Even the old-timers had quieted down. Goncharenko's bunk was empty, but his presence was felt everywhere. His notebook, which Andrei had managed to grab from the bedside table before the investigators arrived, lay beneath his tunic, burning his skin. When Andrei entered, all heads turned toward him. In the eyes of the young soldiers, he read fear and a silent question. In the eyes of the more seasoned soldiers, wariness and anger. He was now a pariah, the commander whose soldier had hanged himself. He silently walked to his bunk in the corner, sat down. His hands were shaking. He needed to say something, to calm them down, to take control of the situation. But the words wouldn't come. He opened his mouth and closed it again. What kind of commander was he now? In the evening, after dinner, when only his men from his detachment remained in the smoking room, two of them approached him. Oleg Petrov, nicknamed Petersburgian because he was Goncharenko's fellow townsman, and Maxim Kozlov, a burly guy from the Urals known as Ural. Both of their faces were gray, angry. "Well, Commander," Oleg Petrov began, his voice quiet but laced with venom. "Commanded enough?" Andrei lifted a heavy gaze to him. "Leave me alone, Oleg. I don't need this right now." "No, you do need this." Petrov stepped closer. His thin shoulders trembled. "You let him down. You saw what those creatures were doing to him. You saw how they were breaking him. Why did you keep silent? Were you afraid of getting a reprimand? Well, you got one. Only it wasn't you. It was Stas. Straight away and lethal." Maxim Kozlov placed a heavy hand on Petrov's shoulder. "Quiet, Petersburgian. Don't shout." "But I will shout," he burst out in a whisper. "Because we're next. You, me, all of us. They'll strangle us one by one, and commanders like you will just have talks." Andrei stood up. He was taller than the lanky Petrov, but now he felt small and pathetic. "And what was I supposed to do? Huh? Go and tell Roshin? And what would have happened? They would have punished them as an example, and then those same old-timers or their buddies would have caught us in a dark corner and crippled us. Or do you think it happens any other way?" "We should have fought," Maxim Kozlov growled. "All together, wall to wall." "And gone to jail," Andrei retorted. "All together. The instigators, to the disciplinary battalion, the rest, to the guardhouse and eternal shame. Is that what you wanted?" Oleg Petrov laughed hysterically, a quiet, choked laugh, full of despair. "Jail, disciplinary battalion, that's better than this. In a noose. He wanted to paint, you understand? He showed me. He was going to apply to the Ripon Institute after the army. He dreamed, and now what? They seal coffins with zinc, you know, so they don't stink." Andrei's breath caught in his throat. He pictured it, and nausea rose to his throat again. "Enough," he whispered. "No, not enough," Maxim Kozlov said firmly. His usually calm, broad face had turned into a mask of determination. "We've had a talk. No one will tolerate this anymore. We're leaving." Andrei froze. "What? Leaving where?" "We're deserting," Oleg Petrov said, looking Andrei straight in the eyes. There was no more hysteria in his gaze, only a cold, dead emptiness. "Tonight, after lights out, there are 5 of us." Andrei looked from one to the other. This was madness, mass desertion, unauthorized absence from a unit. This was a court-martial, guaranteed. Sentences from 3 to 7 years. And if they took weapons... "You're crazy," he breathed out. "They'll catch you in 2 hours. Where are you going to run? Winter's coming. The taiga is all around." "We don't care." Ural shook his head stubbornly. "It's better in prison than here. At least there's a code of honor in prison. Here, there's only lawlessness. They killed Stas, and no one will answer for it. The deputy commander for political affairs has already found the culprit. You. They'll blame everything on you, sweep the case under the rug, and everything will go back to the way it was. But we don't want that." "We're going to the guardhouse," Oleg Petrov chimed in, laying out the plan with a feverish gleam in his eyes. "The guard on the far watchtower is from our draft. He'll pretend he doesn't see anything. We'll go through the hole in the fence behind the bathhouse, and then to the station, 40 kilometers along the tracks. We'll jump on a freight train and east. Somewhere in Siberia, we'll get lost. Andrei listened to this childish, naive plan and understood that they were doomed. They would be caught before dawn. The entire unit would be put on alert. Roads would be blocked. The forest would be combed with dogs. And then their lives would be over. Shame for their families, broken destinies. "You don't understand," he began, trying to reach them. "This isn't the way out. It's even worse. They'll catch you and—" "And what?" Petersburgian interrupted him. "What and? There will be a trial. There will be a court-martial. Great. We'll tell them everything there. How Stas was driven to it, how he was beaten, how he was humiliated, how the officers didn't give a damn, how you, Commander, stood and watched. Let the whole country know what's going on here." He said this defiantly, but Andrei saw in his eyes not only anger, but also desperate hope. Hope that he, Andrei, would stop them, that he would offer another way out. But there was no way out. Andrei stood between a rock and a hard place. On one side, the officers, who had already appointed him guilty of suicide. On the other, his own soldiers, driven to despair and ready for a mad, suicidal escape. If he reports the escape, he'll betray them, send them to a military tribunal, and live the rest of his life branded as an informer. If he doesn't report it, and they escape, he'll become an accomplice, and then the tribunal will be breathing down his neck. "Don't do it," he said quietly, almost pleadingly. "Please, for the sake of your mothers." Maxim Kozlov shook his head. "And what about Stas's mother? Who's thinking about her? She'll get a telegram saying, 'Your son died heroically in the line of duty.' Or will they write the truth? Hanged himself because of the animalistic conditions? No, Commode, it's decided. We're going, and we advise you to come with us. You've got nothing to lose now either. They'll devour you." The proposal hung in the smoky air of the smoking room. Go with them, into nowhere, against the system. Become a deserter, a criminal. Andrei looked at their faces, young, exhausted, full of desperate resolve. He remembered Goncharenko's blue face. He remembered the icy gaze of the deputy commander for political affairs, and for the first time in his service, he felt that the army wasn't just hardships that toughened you up. It was a meat grinder that ground up bones and souls. "I'm not going," he said firmly, "and I won't let you." Oleg Petrov grinned crookedly. "And how will you stop us, Commander? Tie us up or run to inform on us?" He looked at Andrei with contempt and defiance. He was forcing him to make the ultimate, most terrible choice, to become a traitor in their eyes or an accomplice in the eyes of the law. Andrei was silent. He looked at his hands. Sergeant's hands, which were supposed to lead soldiers, not pull them out of a noose. Everything inside him went cold. The hammer and anvil were closing in, and he was right between them. And there was no way out. Not for him, not for them. Only the cracking of breaking bones and destinies. "So, a tragic love affair, you say, Sergeant?" The voice of the Special Investigations officer was as smooth as the surface of solidified engine oil. He expressed neither sympathy nor interest. He was simply stating a fact, summing up a half-hour interrogation in the stuffy storeroom, which reeked of shoe polish and cheap tobacco. Andrei Zaitsev, the squad leader, whom everyone simply called Commode, stood at attention, staring intently at the dusty corner behind the major. Looking into the osobist's colorless, piercing eyes was physically impossible. "Yes, Comrade Major," Andrei squeezed out, feeling a drop of sweat slowly crawling down his temple. "Private Goncharenko, Stanislav Goncharenko, received letters often. He said his girlfriend had given up on him. He was upset." The lie was sticky and disgusting. It coated his tongue and got stuck in his throat. But the truth was even worse. The truth was the nightly pumping sessions that Grandpa Maxim Kozlov, nicknamed Ural, organized. The truth was the humiliating concerts for the senior soldiers, where Stanislav Goncharenko, a quiet guy who had painted amazing landscapes and dreamed of becoming an artist before the army, was forced to cluck like a chicken while standing on a bedside table. The truth was his album, which Ural had found and defaced with obscene pictures, and then forced Stanislav to eat several pages, washing them down with water from the toilet. The truth was that this morning Stanislav Goncharenko, the artist, had been cut down from his belt in the forest belt behind the shooting range. The osobist lazily took a drag on his Bellamore cigarette, blowing a stream of smoke directly into Andrei's face. So he was upset. And you, as squad leader, what did you do? Did you talk to him? Did you report it to the deputy commander for political affairs? I did, Comrade Major. I told him that the army is the school of life, that he had to hang in there. The school of life? The osobist smirked, crushing the cigarette in a tin can that served as an ashtray. Well said, Sergeant. Ideologically sound. But your student failed the exam, mortally. Do you know what a unit emergency is because of a suicide? It's like a sickle through the reputation. The division commander gets it, the regimental commander, the company commander, the deputy commander for political affairs. Everyone. And you know who's going to be the first one to get it? You, Sergeant Zaitsev, for negligence, for missing the soldier. Andrei was silent. What could he say? That he was as afraid of Ural as any spirit was? That Maxim Kozlov, a hulking guy from the Urals who had served 2.5 years, kept not only the new recruits in fear, but also half-timers like Andrei? That any complaint to an officer would brand him as an informer, and a life like that would make the artist's noose seem like mercy? I don't want a unit emergency, Sergeant, the major continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Nobody wants one. We need a simple, understandable story. A tragic love affair. A mental breakdown because of it. A weak psyche. Couldn't handle the hardships of service. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. No hazing. We don't have and cannot have any off-book relations in the Soviet Army. Those are remnants of a damned past. We have a collective, a brotherhood. You conduct political instruction yourself. You should know. Yes, sir, Andrei repeated again like an automaton. Brotherhood. He almost burst out laughing. You're free to go, Sergeant, and think. If I find out that anyone in your squad is blabbing, God help you, the disciplinary battalion will seem like a sanatorium. Go. Andrei spun around on his heels and left the storeroom, staggering as if after a heavy blow. The barracks air, normally stale and heavy, felt like a fresh gulp of freedom, but the freedom was an illusion. He was in a cage, and the bars of that cage had just tightened even further. A crushing silence reigned in the unit. Even the senior conscripts sat quietly on their bunks, not daring to turn on the radio. All eyes were on him, Commode. In them, he read fear, curiosity, and a silent question. Maxim Kozlov, Ural, sat on his bunk, demonstratively polishing his belt buckle. He raised a heavy gaze at Andrei, and barely perceptibly shook his head. The threat was clear without words. Andrei walked to his place and sat on a stool. Directly opposite was Stanislav Goncharenko's bunk. Neatly made by other hands, it gaped with emptiness. Under the mattress still lay that same defaced album. Andrei himself had hidden it there in the morning when they were roused by the alarm. He couldn't allow the special investigators to find it. Why? He didn't even know himself. Maybe it was a last tribute to the artist, or maybe it was self-preservation. After all, one of the pages had a caricature of Ural, and that was the final straw. Evening roll call, dinner in the mess hall, duty assignments. It all passed as if in a fog. Mechanical actions, memorized phrases. Squad, attention, at ease. He was Komod, the commander. He had to keep a straight face, but inside, everything was screaming. He saw before his eyes the face of Stanislav, frightened, humiliated, when Ural forced him to bark like a dog for a thrown piece of bread. He saw the bruises that the artist painstakingly hid under his tunic, and he, Andrei Zaitsev, the commander, had done nothing. He averted his eyes. He told himself that this was the army, that everyone goes through this, that you just had to endure it. He was lying to himself, and that lie had hanged a man today. After lights out, when the barracks had sunk into restless sleep, Andrei couldn't fall asleep. He lay with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and listened to the creaking of the bed springs, to someone sobbing into a pillow. It was Oleg Petrov, the guy from St. Petersburg, an intelligent guy who had ended up in the construction battalion after college. He was friends with Stanislav. They were both outsiders here. Suddenly, Andrei felt a light touch on his shoulder. He sat up sharply. Next to his bunk, like a ghost, stood Oleg Petrov. His face in the dim light of the nightlight was pale and resolute. "Andrei, we need to talk. Let's go." They went to the washroom. Cold tiles, the smell of chlorine and dampness. Water dripped monotonously from the faucet.
I can't take it anymore,
Oleg whispered, his voice trembling with suppressed sobs. "Do you understand? I'm next, or someone else from our guys. That Kozlov, he's a beast. He won't stop. There was a special investigator here today. Did you tell him everything?" Andrei lowered his head. "I told him about the girl." Oleg recoiled as if he had been struck. "What? You? You covered for him? After what he did to Stas? You betrayed him!" "Shut up," Andrei hissed, grabbing him by the collar and pinning him against the wall. "What was I supposed to say? The truth? So that I'd be court-martialed along with Ural? Me, for failure to report him, for driving him to it. And then what? Me in the disciplinary battalion, and they'll send us a new senior conscript here, even worse. Do you think anything will change? The system will devour you and not even choke." Oleg stopped struggling. His eyes filled with tears of despair. "Then what? Wait until we're all hanged one by one? No, we're leaving." Andrei froze. "What?" "We're leaving," Oleg Petrov repeated firmly. "Me and 3 other newbies, tonight, through the hole in the fence behind the motor pool. We're going into the taiga. Better to die of starvation as a free man than here, in a noose." Andrei looked at him, and icy horror gripped him from within. An escape, a mass escape. It was madness. Suicide stretched out over several days. They'd be caught. They'd definitely be caught. Dogs, helicopters, patrols. They'd be found frozen, hungry, driven mad with fear. And then, a tribunal, a real show trial. Desertion in wartime, even if it's peacetime. That's treason. 10, 15 years of labor camps, ruined lives, shame for their families. "You're idiots," Andrei breathed. "You're just idiots. Where will you go? The taiga will devour you in 2 days. You have no food, no compass, no matches. We took some rusks in the mess hall, and we have a lighter. We'll go east, to the railroad. That's 300 kilometers through swamps and fallen trees," Andrei almost shouted in a whisper. "Oleg, think it over. Stanislav is already gone. Don't ruin yourselves too." "And you suggest staying and waiting for our turn?" Hatred flared in Oleg's eyes. "You, Komod, commander! You were supposed to protect us, but you're afraid of them. You're just like them." That blow was the most accurate. Just like them. Andrei let him go. He walked to the window behind which the night was black. Oleg was right. He was afraid. He had betrayed. He had tried to survive, to adapt, to become invisible, and the price of that survival was the life of Stanislav Goncharenko, and now 4 more were at stake. He had to stop them. Not with an order. They wouldn't obey an order now, not by force. There were 4 of them. He had to find the words. But what words could outweigh the horror of Maxim Kozlov and the despair of a friend's death? Andrei turned around. A ringing, cold clarity suddenly cut through the fear and lies swirling in his head, lies meant for the special department officer. He looked at Oleg Petrov, this ruined St. Petersburg intellectual, and saw himself as he'd been just months ago. He saw Stanislav. He saw all those who hadn't yet broken. "All right," Andrei said quietly. His voice was unusually firm, without a trace of hesitation. "You're not going anywhere." "We are." Oleg stubbornly shook his head. "No. You're staying. Because escape is what they expect you to do. It's the easiest way out for them. Write it all off as desertion, as treason, and Ural will stay here and continue to re-educate the new recruits." Oleg looked at him incredulously. "What do you propose?" Andrei took a step towards him. His gaze was heavy and direct. There was no fear in it anymore, only a cold, scorched rage. "I propose we make it so that Maxim Kozlov himself wants to be in a disciplinary battalion, so that he begs for a court-martial as if it were salvation. You're staying, and you'll do exactly what I say. I'm your commander, and from tonight, I start commanding for real." He spoke and was surprised by his own voice. It wasn't the voice of a frightened chirpack, a raw recruit caught between the veterans and the officers. It was the voice of a man who'd passed his point of no return. Today, the army had killed the boy in him, who just wanted to serve his time quietly. And someone else had been born in his place. Komod, commander, someone who would no longer avert his eyes. "We'll avenge Stas," Andrei finished, looking Oleg straight in the eye. "But not the way you planned. We'll do it the army way, cruelly and inexorably. Now go back to the barracks and tell the others that the escape is off, and not a word. Tomorrow morning, a new tour of duty begins, for everyone, especially for Ural." Oleg Petrov stared at him for several long seconds, then slowly nodded and, without a word, left the washroom. Andrei was left alone. He walked to the tap and put his face under the icy drops. The water washed away the sweat, but it couldn't wash away what he felt. It wasn't relief. It was the weight of a decision made. He had just signed a death warrant, either for himself or for Maxim Kozlov. There was no third option. He looked at his reflection in a shard of mirror hanging on the wall. An unfamiliar man with the eyes of an old man stared back at him from the darkness. The army had turned a boy into a man, but the price for it was unbearably high, and the bills were yet to be paid. "Tell me, Sergeant Zaitsev, in detail, from the very beginning." The major's voice from the special department was quiet, almost ingratiating, which made it even more frightening. He didn't bang his fist on the table, didn't shout. He simply sat across from him in the cramped office of the deputy political officer, reeking of cheap tobacco and paper dust, and looked at Andrei Zaitsev with his faded, expressionless eyes. On the table between them lay a thin school notebook, the very one, with Stanislav Goncharenko's drawings. Andrei swallowed. His mouth was dry, as if he'd just run a 10-kilometer forced march in full gear. He, the squad leader, Komod, who was supposed to keep everything under control, now sat like a scolded first-year student and couldn't squeeze out a word. "Comrade Major," he began, but his voice cracked. "You are not a comrade to me, Zaitsev. You are a sergeant in whose squad an emergency of extraordinary proportions has occurred. In your squad, Zaitsev. Private Goncharenko hanged himself in the storage room with a belt. And you, his direct commander, what were you doing at that time? Sleeping? Or maybe you were also re-educating the new recruits. The major slowly flipped through the notebook. On one page was a meticulously detailed drawing of a T-62 tank. On another, a caricature of a warrant officer trading canned stew for vodka with a civilian from the cafeteria. And on the last, torn and crumpled, then smoothed out again, were just a few lines, written in shaky letters. Mom, forgive me. I can't take it anymore. This isn't an army, it's hell. I didn't want to. Andrei looked at the note, and before his eyes appeared a picture he would never forget. A quiet storage room, semi-darkness, the smell of dampness, old overcoats, and something else. Sickly sweet and metallic, and Stanislav Goncharenko, his artist, a quiet, intelligent guy from Lviv, who dreamed of going to art school after the army. He hung there, legs awkwardly bent, because the ceiling in the storage room was low, and next to him lay an overturned ammunition box. He was withdrawn lately, Andrei managed to squeeze out. I talked to him. I tried, the major echoed, without taking his eyes off the notebook. And Maxim Kozlov, your subordinate nicknamed Ural, did he also talk to him? When he forced him to polish his demobilization boots until 3 in the morning, or when he poured a mess kit of cold porridge down his neck because Goncharenko was eating slowly? Is that what you call talking? Andrei was silent. He knew all this. He had seen it, and he had tried. He had tried to talk to Ural, a hulking brute from the Urals, who believed that only a fist could make a soldier out of a spirit. I tried to reason with Oleg Petersky, from St. Petersburg, who was the mastermind behind all the hazing. He didn't hit anyone himself, but skillfully incited others, finding their weak spots. Closet! Are you a padlock or Mother Teresa? Petrov hissed in his ear when Andrei once again pulled Kozlov off Goncharenko. You're supposed to maintain order, not wipe their noses. That's how the system works. We were hounded like that too, and nothing. We became men. And Andrei, caught between the hammer of officer demands, there has to be order in the squad, Zaitsev, and the anvil of the old-timer law was at a loss. He tried to be authoritative, growled at the rookies to keep the old-timers happy, and at the same time secretly slipped Goncharenko an extra piece of bread and said, Hang in there, artist. We'll get through this. Soon you'll be a 6-monther yourself. It'll be easier. But Goncharenko just looked at him with his huge, sad eyes and remained silent. He stopped drawing. His notebook, which he used to show to no one, now lay on his nightstand. Andrei saw how once Maxim Kozlov, laughing, tore a page with a portrait of a girl out of it and drew something obscene on it. Goncharenko didn't say a word then. He just picked up the page, looked at it, and something died in his eyes. Andrei saw it and did nothing. He only hissed at Kozlov, Ural, have you gone completely wild? To which he only shrugged, So what? No need to be all sentimental. This ain't civilian life. Silence, Sergeant? The major slammed the notebook shut. The sound was dry and final, like a gunshot. Fine. Then let's talk about something else. During a search of personal belongings in your squad, besides this note, we found something else interesting. He reached into his tunic's inner pocket and placed a piece of paper folded in quarters on the table. He unfolded it. It was a map, crude, homemade, drawn on tracing paper stolen from headquarters. A map of the area around the unit with marked posts, trails, and patrol schedules. Andrei turned cold. He recognized the handwriting. Goncharenko had drawn it. His calligraphic, almost technical drawing hand. Escape, Zaitsev? The special investigator asked quietly. You decided to organize a mass escape, and your artist was the cartographer? The blood drained from Andrei's face. He knew about it. Of course, he knew. It was their last, desperate idea. A week ago, after another night of pumping, when the old-timers made all the new recruits catch butterflies until morning, frantically waving their hands in front of their faces, Oleg Petrov gathered them in the smoking room. Him, Andrei, Maxim Kozlov, and a couple of other guys. "That's it, guys. Enough," he said then, taking a nervous drag. "I can't take another year and a half of this shit. Ural, you with me? You'll be heading to the guardhouse soon yourself for that bruise on the rookie. The political officer is already eyeing you. Closet, you see that this is a dead end. They'll eat us alive or put us in jail." The idea was insane. To run away in winter into the middle of nowhere, but despair was stronger than fear. They started preparing. They were hoarding rusks, hiding civilian clothes that they managed to trade from the drivers, and Goncharenko, their quiet artist, was supposed to draw a map. He was the only one who could do it from memory after they had been taken to the training ground. He suggested it, Andrei whispered, realizing that he was sinking himself and everyone else. Goncharenko said that a court-martial was better than this. "You're lying, Sergeant," the major said without malice. "You're lying through your teeth. Goncharenko was broken. Those types don't organize escapes. They go and hang themselves. But you and your buddy Petrov and that bull Kozlov, you could very well have. You used the guy, his talent, and when he finally broke, you just threw him away, like used material. Is that how it was?" Andrei was silent, staring at a single spot on the peeling wall. He heard Goncharenko's voice in his ears, quiet, almost a whisper, 2 days ago in the washroom. "Andrei, I can't take it anymore. I drew the map, but I'm not going. I'm afraid. They'll catch us, and it'll be even worse." "Don't worry, artist," Andrei replied cheerfully then, patting him on the shoulder. "We'll get through this. All together. One for all, and all for one. Remember." Goncharenko looked at him then, and there was such hopelessness in his gaze that Andrei felt uneasy, but he brushed it off. Duties, details, constant stress, no time for sentimentality. "So, Zaitsev," the major got up, signaling that the conversation was over. "You have a choice. Either you write a full and sincere confession right now, with all the names, who hit, who humiliated, who came up with the escape, who drew the map, the whole truth, as if before God. And then, maybe, you'll get away with disciplinary battalion, or maybe they'll just transfer you to another unit with a demotion. You'll finish your service as a private, but at least you'll be alive and free in the end." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Or you continue to play the noble one and cover up for your comrades, and then you all go to court-martial together. Group conspiracy, driving to suicide, preparation for desertion in wartime. These, Sergeant, are very serious charges. Enough for 10 years. In a strict regime camp, they'll quickly make a man out of you, if you survive. And your parents will receive a letter that their son is a traitor and a criminal. Think, Zaitsev. I'll be back in an hour." The door slammed shut behind the major. Andrei was left alone in the silence of the office. An hour. Just 1 hour to decide his fate and the fate of those who, only yesterday, were his squad, his little army. He returned to the barracks as if to a stranger's house. The soldiers recoiled from him as if he had the plague. The air was thick with tension. Goncharenko's bed was neatly made, the bedside table empty, as if he'd never been there. Maxim Kozlov and Oleg Petrov were standing in the corner by the rifle rack. Seeing Andrei, they approached. "Well, Komod?" Kozlov asked nervously, his bull neck tensed. "What did the spook want?" "They know about the escape," Andrei replied dully, not looking at them. "They found the map. Petrov cursed under his breath. His usual Petersburg refinement had vanished, like peeling paint. His face became angry and frightened. The artist. So he ratted before he died? Left a note? He didn't rat. Andrei raised a heavy gaze to him. He just couldn't take it anymore. We drove him to it. You with your ideas, Ural with his fists, and me by staying silent and watching. Cut the philosophy crap, Kozlov snapped. What do we do now? What did that snoop from Special Ops tell you? Andrei looked at them, at the dull, frightened bull Kozlov, at the cunning, evasive Petrov, who was probably already figuring out how to weasel out of it and blame it all on others, at Goncharenko's empty bunk. Something clicked inside him. The spring that had been compressed for the entire year and a half of his service snapped. He was no longer commode, trying to be fair. He wasn't a guy caught between a rock and a hard place. He was Sergeant Zaitsev, in whose squad a soldier had hanged himself, and he was the only one who could decide anything now. He gave me an hour, Andrei said slowly, enunciating each word. His voice sounded unfamiliar, harsh, and without a trace of doubt. The commode, who couldn't always be authoritative, was gone. Either I rat everyone out, and we get what's coming to us, or I take the fall. Kozlov and Petrov froze, staring at him. Hope flickered in their eyes. I'll say I thought it all up, Andrei continued, staring past them at Goncharenko's empty bunk. That I made Goncharenko draw the map, that I talked you into it, that I drove him to it. Commode, are you serious? Petrov whispered, not believing his ears. Never been more serious. Andrei grinned crookedly. There wasn't a trace of humor in that grin, only icy emptiness. I'm the squad leader. I'm responsible for everything. Right, comrade soldiers? One for all. He didn't finish. He simply turned and walked toward the exit of the barracks, back to the political officer's office. He walked, and with each step, he felt the army burning out the remnants of that 18-year-old boy who had once come to the military registration and enlistment office. It was taking away his freedom, his future, but giving something else in return. Something terrible, heavy, like granite. Responsibility. Not the kind they write about in the regulations, but the real thing. Responsibility for a broken life and for his own, which he was now going to break himself. The army was making a man out of him, but the price for it turned out to be too high. The price of one life and one notebook of drawings. Private Goncharenko, the major from the special department said, his voice as smooth as the lined paper in his notepad, was described by his comrades as withdrawn, unsociable, prone to melancholy. Do you agree with this characterization, Sergeant Zaitsev? Andrei Zaitsev sat on a stool, clutching its rough edges with his fingers. The political officer's office, temporarily transformed into a torture chamber for souls, smelled of old paper and cheap shipper cologne. Opposite him, behind the table, sat a short, stocky major. His eyes, colorless as sun-faded glass, studied Andrei, unblinking. He was normal, Comrade Major. He drew well. Drew? The major made a note. What exactly did he draw? Anti-Soviet caricatures? Portraits of leaders of capitalist countries? Landscapes. His mother. The village. He decorated letters home. They called him the artist. A nickname, then. The major scribbled again. Are nicknames accepted in your unit? That encourages non-regulation relationships, Sergeant. As squad leader, you should have put a stop to it. Andrei was silent. What could he say? That in this gray uniform mass, where even names were erased to ranks, A nickname was the only thing that made a person even a little bit themselves. That Ural wasn't just Maxim Kozlov, but a block from the Ural Mountains, solid and impenetrable. That Petersburg was Oleg Petrov, who could talk for hours about the drawbridges and the Hermitage, and in his voice you could hear the draft from the Neva. And Stanislav Goncharenko was the artist. He saw the world in colors, not in shades of khaki. You're silent, Sergeant? Good. You're considering your answer. I'll ask the question another way. Did Private Goncharenko leave a suicide note? No, Comrade Major. Strange. The Major leaned back in his chair, and it creaked plaintively. Usually such melancholy natures like to pour out their souls on paper. Maybe you found it and, afraid of the responsibility, destroyed it? Blood rushed to Andrei's temples. He remembered the scrap of paper he'd found under Stanislav's mattress after his body had been taken away. It wasn't text, it was a drawing, a pencil sketch, a barracks cot, and above it, hanging in the air, a boot suspended from a belt. That was it. No faces, no words, just a boot and emptiness. Andrei crumpled the paper and shoved it into his tunic pocket. It was still there, burning against his thigh. No, Comrade Major. There was nothing. All right. The Major leaned forward, his voice quieter, almost confidential. Zaitsev, I can see you're a smart guy. They don't make just anyone a squad leader. You understand that we're dealing with a national-level emergency here. A suicide in a model unit. It's a stain on everyone. On the regiment commander, the political officer, on me, and on you, Sergeant. On you, first and foremost. You're his direct commander. You slept in the same room as him. Didn't you see anything? Andrei stared at his hands. His knuckles were bruised from the last unloading of the wagons. Dirt under his fingernails. The hands of a worker, not a commander. What hadn't he seen? How Stanislav Goncharenko had stopped eating in the mess hall, giving his portion of butter to the old-timers. How his brand-new uniform had turned to rags in a week because he was washing foot wrappings for the entire senior service contingent of the platoon at night. How Maxim Kozlov, nicknamed Ural, made him do push-ups 100 times for stupidity when he couldn't draw Lenin's squint in the wall newspaper on the first try. He had seen everything, and he had tried. He'd talked to Ural a couple of times. Max, leave him alone, he's not all there. What can you expect from him? To which Kozlov, flexing his jaw muscles, had replied, Buddy, don't try to build some kind of fair world here. The army will make a man out of any artist. Or a cripple. Let him get used to it. Demobilization is just around the corner and we're bored. He had gone to the political officer. He had listened, nodded, and then said, Sergeant Zaitsev, the collective is a complex organism. Adjustment is inevitable. As a commander, you must educate, not complain. Conduct a political discussion about the friendship of the peoples of the USSR. It strengthens the spirit. A hammer and an anvil. On one side, the dull, confident in its impunity, power of the old-timers. On the other, the bureaucratic demagoguery of officers for whom a soldier was just a line in a report. And between them, him, Andrei Zaitsev, a 20-year-old squad leader, trying to hold together the crumbling world of his squad. I had conversations with him, Comrade Major, Andrei squeezed out. I told him he had to be stronger, that the army tempers you. The Major nodded approvingly. There, that's the right answer. Now tell me, Zaitsev, were there any talks about desertion in your squad? The ground fell out from under Andrei's feet. Andrei felt cold sweat trickle down his back. Desertion. Their desperate, insane plan, born in the smoking room after another nightly concert put on by Ural. Oleg Petrov from Petersburg had whispered, choking with rage, We have to get out of here, anywhere. We'll get lost on some construction site, go to the taiga. Prison is better than this every day. Stanislav Goncharenko had been silent then, just drawing something on the ground with a twig. A bird, it seemed. "No, sir." Andrei's voice was alien, wooden. "Don't lie to me, Sergeant." The major's eyes were steel again. Private Petrov turned out to be more talkative. Returning to the barracks, Andrei felt how the air had changed. It had become thick, heavy, like wet broadcloth. The soldiers, who had been living one, albeit lousy, life just yesterday, had broken up into hostile islands. The old-timers, led by Maxim Kozlov, were sitting on their cots, demonstratively playing cards loudly. They weren't looking at Andrei, but he felt their glances, angry, assessing. "Snitch," they read. The newbies had huddled together by the far window. Oleg Petrov, from Petersburg, was standing with his back to everyone, looking at the parade ground. His shoulders were shaking. He had cracked. Andrei didn't blame him. After Stanislav was found, after the icy horror in the eyes of the special officers, anyone could break. Their childish desertion plan now looked like high treason. Andrei walked to his cot, sat down. The silence was oppressive. Even Ural had stopped shuffling the deck. Everyone was waiting. "Well, squad leader," Maxim Kozlov threw the cards onto the blanket. "Did you sell us out to the special officer? Did you tell him how we were educating the newbie?" Andrei slowly raised his head. He looked straight into Ural's insolent eyes. There was no fear. After the major's office, after realizing that he had failed, that he hadn't saved a person, all that remained was a burned-out emptiness and a cold, ringing rage. "Shut up, Kozlov," he said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You lousy educator." Ural was taken aback. He slowly stood up. A 2-meter machine, used to not being contradicted. "What's with you, Zaitsev? Gone crazy? Or is your rank too tight?" He took a step towards Andrei. The entire barracks froze. This was the end of the old world. The squad leader, who had tried to be fair, now had to either break completely or... "I said, shut up," Andrei repeated, standing up. He was a head shorter than Kozlov, thinner in bone. But in his eyes was something Ural had never seen before: indifference to the consequences. "He put his head in a noose because of you, because of your stupid jokes, because of your hazing. Were you bored? Soon to be demobilized soldier? Is it fun now? The special investigator knows your name, and about the foot wraps, and the oil, and the 100 push-ups for the motherland. You think you'll get away with it?" Maxim Kozlov froze. His face turned from crimson to pale. Demobilization. A sacred word. 3 years of hell for the sake of that one word. And now it could all collapse. A tribunal, a disciplinary battalion. That was scarier than any special investigator. Did you tell him?" he croaked. "What do you think?" Andrei smiled without joy. "He asked, I answered. Only I didn't say it was about you. I said it was me, the squad leader, who hadn't kept an eye on him. That it was my fault. I took all the blame. You understand, you Ural scum?" Kozlov looked at him, uncomprehending. The other old-timers also exchanged confused glances. They had expected betrayal, informing, and they got this. "Why?" Ural squeezed out. "Because if I had turned you in, we'd all be taken apart one by one." Andrei's voice strengthened, a metallic edge appearing in it. "You, to the disciplinary battalion. Me, I'd be demoted, and also facing a tribunal for concealment. Petrov, for thoughts of escape. All of us. But like this, one person is guilty. Me. And the official version will be an accident due to negligence. Because nobody needs an emergency. The major himself explained this to me between the lines. They need to close the case, and they need a scapegoat. I became it. He approached Oleg Petrov. He flinched and turned around. His eyes were red, his face swollen. "And you, Petersburg guy, good on you for cracking," Andrei said, unexpectedly calmly. "You did the right thing. Otherwise, we'd all be locked up for that escape attempt, in places where even a construction battalion would seem like paradise. You saved us all, you could say, at the cost of Stas." He returned to the middle of the barracks. He looked around at everyone, both the frightened old-timers and the crushed freshmen. "That's it. Show's over. We're moving on, but differently. From this day on," he looked at Kozlov, "no more performances, no more hazing, no more new guys and old-timers. There's the regulations, there's service. Anyone who doesn't understand, I'll personally take them to the special department and tell them everything as it was, with names, dates, and details. I have nothing to lose now. Clear?" Maxim Kozlov nodded silently and sat on his bunk. For the first time in 18 months of service, Andrei saw him broken. Not physically, morally. He, the master of the barracks, suddenly understood that his power was an illusion, held up by the fear of those weaker than him. And this illusion had just killed a man and almost buried him himself. 6 months passed. The investigation ended with nothing. As Andrei had predicted, everything was attributed to violation of safety regulations during maintenance work. The deputy commander for political affairs was transferred to another unit with a demotion. The company commander received a severe reprimand. Andrei Zaitsev, strangely enough, was not touched. The major from the special department apparently appreciated his move. To take all the blame in order to save the unit from a complete rout, it was in the spirit of the system. The system didn't need guilty parties, it needed to save face. Andrei gave it that opportunity. Life in the barracks changed. Hazing didn't disappear completely. That was impossible. But it went underground, became cowardly and petty. Maxim Kozlov served out his last months quietly, keeping a low profile. He was no longer Ural. He was just Private Kozlov, who was afraid of his own shadow and waited for the demobilization order like manna from heaven. Andrei Zaitsev became different. From a boy trying to be fair, he turned into a man who knew the price of that fairness. He became strict, taciturn, demanding to the smallest detail. The young soldiers were afraid of him, but also respected him. They knew Sergeant Zaitsev wouldn't let them be offended, but he wouldn't let them slack off either. He drove them to the bone during training exercises, made them scrub the barracks until they gleamed, and learn the regulations by heart. He didn't try to be their friend. He taught them to survive. One evening, standing guard on the tower, he took out that worn, crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. The drawing by Stanislav Goncharenko, a boot hanging on a belt over an empty bunk. He stared at it for a long time. This was the price of his tempering, the price of his transformation from boy to man, a man in the army style, one who understood that the world wasn't divided into good and evil, but into those who survived and those who broke down. He hadn't become better. He hadn't become kinder. He had simply become stronger. The army hadn't made him a hero. It had made him a soldier who had gone through a war where there were no shots fired, a war for the right to remain human in a system that was grinding souls. Andrei carefully folded the drawing and hid it back. Demobilization was soon. He would return home different, grown up. And no one would ever know what price he had paid for that adulthood there, in that God-forsaken construction battalion where one artist had drawn his own death. He looked at the stars. They were cold and distant, just like the justice he had once believed in. The army had made him a man, cruel, ugly, but true. He had endured. He had survived. And Stanislav Goncharenko had not, and he would have to live with that for the rest of his life.